Chapter 476. The essence of the entire cloud forest tree was completely swallowed by Lin Feng. The huge amount of spiritual essence almost instantly caused Lin Feng's Yuanying and Universal Dharma idol to explode. The cloud forest tree was one of the few spirit trees that were second only to the four great spirit plants of heaven and earth. Such a spirit tree had reached 10,000 years of age, and the spiritual essence contained within it was something that even a primordial soul realm expert would need a very long time to completely refine and absorb. Lin Feng's Yuanying immediately became unstable under the impact of the huge amount of spiritual essence. At this moment, the four-faced, eight-armed Universal Dharma idol on top of the bell of creation suddenly used its 8 arms to form a seal. Each arm formed a seal. For symbols, heaven opening technique, earth heaven bearing seal. The 4 heaven bearing seals stood up at the same time. Instantly, a grand force that could suppress all turbulence spread out, immediately stabilizing Lin Feng's Yuanying. Lin Feng's Yuanying, which had stabilized once again, immediately formed a heaven bearing seal and sat down cross-legged. Silently, he absorbed and refined the spiritual essence of the cloud forest tree, which was as vast as the sky and as vast as the sea. As he cultivated, he lost track of time. Lin Feng's Yuanying continued to strengthen as time passed. From the appearance of an 11 or 12-year-old, it grew all the way to the appearance of a 15 or 16-year-old. The appearance of a peak Yuanying would, under normal circumstances, be the appearance of a cultivator when he was about 16 years old. When Lin Feng's Yuanying grew to its limit, he began to drive his Universal Dharma idol to absorb the remaining spiritual essence of the cloud forest tree. His Universal Dharma idol was extremely powerful to begin with. Therefore, cultivating and strengthening it consumed more resources and energy than other people's Universal Dharma idols. Fortunately, the spiritual qi on Yujing Mountain was dense, and with the support of the spiritual essence of the cloud forest tree, Lin Feng's cultivation was twice the result with half the effort. His avatar of heaven and earth was made up of the jade capital mountain rock, the profound heaven treasure tree, and the cyclic purple qi, while the will of the Tao naturally belonged to Lin Feng himself. When Lin Feng pushed his Dharma of heaven and earth to the limit, the concept of its power was actually somewhat similar to the 4-in-1 Mount Yujing that Lin Feng had controlled in the past. Although it was much weaker, it was like a smaller version of Mount Yujing. With a slight thought, Lin Feng's avatar of heaven and earth dove into the void and roamed freely in the heavens. Its entire body glowed with 7-colored light as it sliced open the void turbulence. The 8 arms waved in unison, and the giant heaven and earth law idol's body swayed in the void, and suddenly flashed into countless spacetime planes. The 4 faces chanted together, and purple qi filled the sky. Within the purple qi that was as vast as the sea, there were countless scenes. Wind and fire, pavilions, the sun and moon, mountains and rivers, peddlers, dragons, elephants, tigers, and leopards, thousands of things, and the creation of all living beings, rose and fell. In the next moment, the 8 arms of Lin Feng's Universal Dharma idol reached out in all directions. The huge palms clenched together, and suddenly the entire void shattered, turning into endless surging earth, water, fire, and wind. They kept surging, stirring up the surrounding space into a chaotic mess. Lin Feng willed it again, and the Universal Dharma idol had already retracted. The power of my Universal Dharma idol is so strong that it can probably tear apart the primordial spirit incarnation of an ordinary cultivator. Lin Feng was calm. He was not arrogant or conceited. Instead, he made the most basic judgment based on the actual situation. But it's still not enough. With Lin Feng's accumulation and cultivation, it was actually not difficult for him to break through from the middle stage of Yuanying to the late stage of Yuanying. The reason why he had not broken through was because there was no need. The strength of the late stage of Yuanying compared to the middle stage of Yuanying was in the Universal Dharma idol, and it was not convenient for Lin Feng to use the Universal Dharma idol against his enemies. Therefore, from the beginning, Lin Feng only had one goal. Primordial Spirit. He wanted to directly reach the Primordial Spirit stage. Lin Feng had already consumed the 33 days fortune immortal pill. At this moment, he activated the medicinal power, and suddenly the will of the great path of heaven and earth gathered together to support his body. His yuanying eyes shone brightly, and in each of his pupils, there were black and white lights moving together. Lin Feng kept inhaling and exhaling a huge amount of spiritual qi. The entire yuanying was overturned, and the earth and sky were turned upside down. At this moment, he seemed to sense a huge door above his head. It was faintly discernible, and it was as heavy as a mountain. If he could pass this test, he would be able to travel freely. The world would be different from then on. He would no longer be mortal, and he would be able to go anywhere in the world. The will of the great path of heaven and earth was like a straight path, helping Lin Feng to come to the front of this door. Lin Feng tried to push the door, but it swayed a little, but it did not open. There was only this door between him and the primordial soul realm, but it seemed so close. Lin Feng was already standing in front of the door, but he was still one step away. This step, no matter what, could not be crossed. Lin Feng secretly frowned. Could it be that I was too impatient? I have just broken through to the late stage of yuanying, and my foundation is not stable yet, and I want to try to break through to the primordial soul realm. How difficult was it to reach the primordial soul realm? If one does not reach the primordial soul realm, their lifespan will eventually come to an end. Even if they live a peaceful life, on the day their lifespan comes they will still be a cup of dirt. In the late stage of yuanying, the laws of heaven and earth, no matter how they gallop, in the end they only have 60 cycles of 60 years. A lifespan of 3,600 years can be called longevity, but there will always be an end. Only by cultivating to the primordial soul realm can one be at the same time as this world. As long as the world is not destroyed, then naturally their lifespan will be endless, and they can live freely as they please. And since ancient times, how many people have fallen under the primordial soul realm, unable to advance even an inch, and could only sorrowfully watch as their lifespan came to an end. In terms of the probability of a cultivator breaking through, yuanying reaching the primordial soul realm is the most difficult test. As Lin Feng's cultivation gradually grew, he began to come into more and more contact with the world of primordial soul realm cultivators. But in reality, to this day, looking back, there are really very few cultivators who can reach the primordial soul realm. The Celeritas Sword Sect, the Hu family, the Yu family, the Blaze Sword Sect, the Wind God Sect, these sects can already be considered to be famous large sects and forces in the vast land of the Divine Continent, but every single one of them also only has one primordial spirit cultivator holding the fort. The Sun Moon Sword Sect, the Sun and the Moon, the twin swords in harmony, have always been sword companions who cultivate together. Only the sect master, the Sun Glory Sword Venerable, is alone. For thousands of years he has been bitterly waiting for his Moonlight Sword Venerable to appear, but until today he is still alone. The Tianqi sect and the Northern Militant Royal Court, this pair of old enemies rule the northern frontier together. In the game between the Great Zhou and the Great Qin, the two heroes of the northern frontier occupy a very important position and are fought to be roped in. The Tianqi sect has a total of 3 primordial soul realm cultivators, the sect master Chao Wei, plus the ice and fire elders who live in seclusion in the sacred land and do not care about worldly affairs. The Northern Militant Royal Court's primordial soul realm cultivators, the Northern Militant Great Chanyu, the Left Virtuous Prince, the Right Virtuous Prince, and the High Priest, a total of 4 people. After the Left Virtuous Prince died under the claws of the ancient Kuanpeng, there are only 3 left. These forces also have many talented people in their sects, but there are only so few primordial soul realm experts. It is not that they do not want to have more primordial soul realm experts, but the difficulty of achieving the primordial soul realm is simply too high. Like the Sun Glory Sword Venerable, the Celeritas Sword Venerable, Hu Xiu, Yu Xintao, Chao Wei, and other primordial soul realm experts, in their long lives, have already helplessly watched their juniors exhaust their lifespans in front of them countless times. Their disciples and grand disciples all die of old age one after another, leaving them in the primordial soul realm to helplessly watch this scene. Then they think of ways to train a new generation of geniuses, hoping that someone can stand out. One of the main reasons why the Taishu Temple, the Mount Shu Sword Sect, the Great Zhou Dynasty, and the Great Qin Dynasty are recognized as the four most powerful forces in the world is that they have enough primordial soul realm experts. The reincarnation sect is in constant internal strife, with serious internal strife. They often fight among themselves, but no one dares to look down on them. The main reason is that each of the 6 paths of reincarnation has at least one primordial soul realm expert. Why is the Taishu Temple recognized as the #1 sacred land of the human race? Even though most of its energy is used to monitor the movements of the demon race in Infinite Wasteland, no one dares to target it. There is only one reason: it is powerful enough to have the largest number of primordial soul realm cultivators in the entire Great Tianyuan world. The Tao Dharma of the Taishu Temple, the essence of the Great Way of Great Void, is known as the Tao Dharma of the human race that is closest to the origin of the Great Tao. The Taishu Temple produces many geniuses and is known as the concentration camp of geniuses. Even so, many of the descendants of the Taishu Temple have fallen at the threshold of the primordial soul realm. Among them, there is no lack of outstanding talents who have left their names in the history books. Other than Lin Daohan, who had already achieved the primordial spirit on White Cloud Mountain, the other 3 world wayfarers of the Taishu Temple who had recently entered the world to gain experience, none of them had an easy path to the primordial spirit. Pang Jie suffered a huge setback outside the Sand Continent city and had a bad reputation. He is still cultivating in the White Cloud Mountain, struggling to break through to the primordial soul realm. Yan Mingyue almost died with Long Yi, but she finally broke through the bottleneck and achieved the primordial soul realm. Meng Bingyun is the most miserable. She was unable to advance to the primordial soul realm even on the day of her death. This is the primordial soul realm. The difficulty of achieving the primordial soul realm exceeds the difficulty of all the previous stages on the path of cultivation. But this does not make Lin Feng depressed and give up. At this moment, his heart is extremely calm. Have I lost confidence in myself? No, on the contrary, I have accumulated enough. Today is the day to achieve the primordial soul realm. At this moment, Lin Feng's heart is unprecedentedly clear. There are no negative shadows, no selfish thoughts. Taishu Temple, Shu Mountain, the Great Zhou Dynasty, the Great Qin Dynasty, the Heavenly Pool Sect, the Enchantress, the Golden Rock Great Sage and so on, they all disappeared from his mind. Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, Yu Hongyan, Yang Qing, Tunten, Miao Shihao, Kang Nanhua, Jia Yu, and so on, they all disappeared from his mind. Even the system, the mission, the prize, they all no longer think about it. At this moment, Lin Feng's spirit, energy, and spirit reached the peak, completely fusing into one, and only moving forward towards one goal. In his consciousness, only the comprehension of the universe and the Tao of heaven and earth remained, and all of this sublimated into an unwavering will. Forge ahead, press forward with an indomitable will. Amidst the rumbling, in his sea of consciousness, Lin Feng successfully pushed open that door that had been sealed all along. His yuanying turned into a ray of flowing light, charging into the Dharma idol of heaven and earth. As if a person's soul had a body, yuanying and the Dharma idol became one, charging into that open door together. Passing through the door of the void, the 4 faces of Lin Feng's Dharma idol revealed a peaceful and joyful smile at the same time. Then, the Dharma idol of heaven and earth collapsed with a loud bang. Chapter 477. Lin Feng's yuanying merged with the Dharma of heaven and earth. As the illusory and real changed, he passed through the door that had finally opened. Under the baptism of countless great Tao nomological laws, Lin Feng's Dharma of heaven and earth that had fused with yuanying suddenly shattered, turning into dazzling talisman seeds. These talisman seeds constantly absorbed the great Tao nomological laws of heaven and earth. Under the nourishment of these nomological powers, they rapidly grew and strengthened. At the same time, in this process, they gradually merged with the world. Lin Feng felt that his consciousness was somewhat blurred, as if his entire person had become a part of the world. But in this blurriness, there was an unprecedented clarity, as if everything was under his control, omniscient and omniscient. His body turned into thousands of talismans, fluttering in the void, and finally gathered together again. Countless talismans constantly merged, and finally became a whole again. It was half black and half white, a Tai Chi diagram with the two poles fused. The Tai Chi diagram did not exist in the great heaven primordial world, but it was also the foundation of the Tao that Lin Feng had in mind when he had created his own Tao through the system. Now, this was the primordial spirit incarnation that he had obtained after cultivating the heavenly virtue scripture and achieving the primordial soul stage. I was not born like this, and I was lost in the mortal world for 2 lifetimes. Suddenly, I understood the wonders of heaven and man, one black and one white, and I became a god. In the vast void, the Tai Chi diagram that Lin Feng's primordial spirit incarnation had turned into was vast and boundless, as if it was a universe of its own. Black and white fused, constantly rotating, and evolving into thousands of mysteries. After an unknown period of time, the Tai Chi diagram that Lin Feng's primordial spirit incarnation slowly shrank, passing through the void and returning to the dark heaven time-light cave. Silently, his physical body, which had been sitting cross-legged on the top of the treasure tree, flew up and entered the Tai Chi diagram. As the Tai Chi diagram rotated, Lin Feng's physical body had already disappeared. The black and white blended light and shadow rotated in the air, turning back into Lin Feng's appearance. He was still dressed in a purple robe, but there was an additional Tai Chi diagram on his forehead. This was not Lin Feng's original physical body, but a manifestation of his primordial spirit. He was not a pure martial adept and did not value his original physical body, so he simply refined his physical body into his primordial spirit. Lin Feng's expression was calm and filled with faint joy. He raised his finger and gently tapped his forehead. The Tai Chi diagram had already disappeared. He landed on the top of the small mysterious heaven treasure tree, and his mind merged with the white jade Jing mountain, the mysterious heaven treasure tree, and the cyclic purple qi. He felt an unprecedented harmony. At this moment, the 3 great treasures seemed to have become a part of his body, and he could use them as he pleased. Lin Feng smiled and clapped his palms together. A shadow flew out from his glabella. It was the shadow of the bell of creation. At that moment, the bell of fortune was still just an intent. Lin Feng had to refine it himself before it could become a real magic treasure. However, for the current Lin Feng, it was no longer something that he could only dream of. Just like when he had condensed the universal Dharma, Lin Feng used the jade Jing mountain stone and the leaves of the mysterious heaven treasure tree as the backbone to refine the bell of creation. After the embryonic form was completed, the cyclic purple qi poured into it. It was as if a wisp of human life had been injected into the clay embryo. No matter how lifelike the originally lifeless clay sculpture or wooden sculpture was, it was still not truly alive. But now, the light and shadow of the bell of creation immediately glowed with the luster of life. A young but grand will seemed to be forming, like a real life with its own consciousness and thoughts. This was the magic treasure spirit of the bell of creation. Lin Feng watched this scene silently, feeling the will of life coming from nothing, being born from the primordial chaos, splitting the yin and yang, breaking through the chaos, splitting the heavens and earth, and finally establishing creation. The image of the big bell gradually changed, turning into a huge pitch-black stone door. Its surface was covered with thousands of relief carvings, ancient and desolate, exuding a strong aura of life. Lin Feng waved his hand, and the magic treasure embryo in the yin and yang life and death formation, the casting life sealing stone, flew out and landed in the shadow of the huge stone door. Rise! Lin Feng's magic power was almost endless. It surged, and the casting life sealing stone gradually changed, merging with the shadow of the stone door. In the continuous sound of the bell, the stone door exuded a strong vitality. This was the first transformation of the bell of creation, the life creation door. It represented the birth of infinite life, the door to the creation of infinite things, and contained the great power to open up a place of creation and create a world. Lin Feng raised his hand and grabbed, directly sucking the huge stone door into his hand. It was not that the stone door had become smaller, but Lin Feng's 5 fingers opened and closed, directly grabbing the space. Feeling the power contained in the life creation door, Lin Feng immediately smiled. This is only the first form of the bell of creation, and it already has endless magical uses. The life creation door contained unparalleled life force, far above the Wudong tree heart and the casting life sealing stone. When used for treatment, it had the miraculous effect of reviving the dead and growing flesh and bones. With this treasure protecting him, Lin Feng was impervious to all evils. Even if he was injured, he could recover in an instant. Moreover, this treasure had the power to nurture all living beings. If it was used in fights, it would also have endless magical uses. It was both a treasure for protection and a treasure for fights. Silently, Lin Feng tried to figure out the concept of power within. Yes, after I create the third chapter of the Heavenly Tao scripture, I can sacrifice and refine this treasure's second form. The four forms combine to form the complete true meaning of creation, destruction, creation, and destruction. Only then would this treasure be refined to the supreme realm of great perfection. Lin Feng only had to think about it for a bit and he felt fascinated. No wonder this thing in the system, with just a thought, could be worth the sum of all the other things. It's finally done. Lin Feng stepped out of the dark heaven-time light grotto heaven. Silently, he looked at the jade capital mountain in front of him, feeling every blade of grass, every tree, and every living being on the mountain. He felt that it was an unprecedented, yet familiar experience. This feeling was mysterious beyond words. It was indescribably wondrous. At this time, Lin Feng remembered to calculate the time. After thinking for a while, he realized that he had spent 7 years in the dark heaven-time light grotto heaven. In the outside world, only 20 days had passed. 7 years. Lin Feng pondered for a while. He remembered that the system would reward him with a chance to draw a prize every month. Now that he thought about it, he had accumulated a lot. However, according to past experience, every time Lin Feng's cultivation level crossed a major realm, the system would upgrade. Lin Feng's consciousness entered the system. As expected, the system was currently upgrading and could not draw prizes. I'll have to wait. Lin Feng shrugged, withdrew his consciousness from the system, and casually strolled around the mountain. He looked at Zhu Yi and the disciples in the Qian Tian Palace working hard, looked at Shi Tianhao, Tunten, and the others living freely in the desolate Heaven Valley, and looked at Jia Yu not even daring to breathe loudly in front of his wife. Oh. Lin Feng was casually strolling around when a transmission crystal on his body suddenly reacted. Someone was contacting him. Lin Feng raised his brows when he saw the caller. It was the sect master of the Sun Moon Sword sect, the glorious Sun Sword Sovereign. They had not contacted each other since the desolate Sea Divine Assembly. Who knew that the glorious Sun Sword Sovereign would suddenly send a message today? Back at the desolate Sea Divine Assembly, Lin Feng had suggested that the sword companions of the Sun Moon Sword sect could participate in the Divine Assembly in pairs. Lin Feng's starting point was admittedly for a portion of the Xian Gate Sky sect's people to also obtain the qualifications to enter the ancient desolate sea world, but objectively, he did indeed help the Sun Moon Sword sect. The Solar Glory Sword Venerable was grateful for this, so he got along well with Lin Feng. Lin Feng answered the transmission and heard the glorious Sun Sword Sovereign's voice. Sect Master Lin, how have you been? The glorious Sun Sword Sovereign is too polite, Lin Feng said with a smile. May I know what's the matter this time that you have to personally transmit a message to me? As Xianmen Tianzong improved, all aspects were gradually on the right track. Zhu Yi was in charge of external communication at the lower levels. This was also one of the few tasks that was not handed over to Dao Jiqiang. As for the higher levels, Kang Nanhua was in charge of communication at the Yuanying level. He was also in charge of communication with the Heavenly Trade Pavilion. Right now, there are already very few people who can directly contact Lin Feng. Only sect masters like the glorious Sun Sword Exalt and the primordial divinity bigwigs can directly contact Lin Feng. If it's a normal matter, they naturally don't need to personally open their mouths, the disciples of the sect can communicate with each other. I heard from others that Sect Master Lin is a Sword Dao Grandmaster. Slowly, the glorious Sun Sword Sovereign said, "Recently, a portion of our Sword Dao cultivators will gather together and exchange Sword Dao. If Sect Master Lin is willing, I sincerely invite you to attend the meeting. I can ask you for guidance on Sword Dao. What do you think, Sect Master Lin?" Lin Feng's expression did not change. A faint smile appeared on his face. He could hear the words "ask for guidance" from the glorious Sun Sword Sovereign. There was no hostility in it. It was not a challenge. However, the word "consult" definitely didn't mean that he was truly asking for guidance. There was a hidden meaning in Solar Luminary's words. The so-called gathering of a portion of sword cultivators definitely wasn't just for a simple exchange of swordsmanship. This won't be a simple gathering, Lin Feng had a guess in his heart. After thinking for a moment he gladly agreed, "I wouldn't dare to ask for advice, just like what the Solar Glory Sword Venerable said, we'll just have an exchange." The glorious Sun Sword Sovereign also smiled. "In that case, the great Qin dynasty's eastern border Lin province, Qingling mountain ranges Tianjia Peak, awaits Sect Master Lin's arrival. Among the mountains of West Shu, 6 lone peaks soared into the sky. Each of them was straight and steep, piercing through the clouds like 6 extremely huge unsheathed swords. These 6 mountains were like 6 swords that emanated boundless sword chi, and each of them had different dispositions. Some were gentle, some were forceful and ferocious, some were fierce and ruthless, some were agile and swift, some were simple and dignified, some were feminine and changeable. In the sky above the 6 mountains, there was actually another mountain that floated in the sky. There was no support below it, but it was lifted up by the sword chi from the 6 mountains, hovering in the sky. In the hall of one of the 6 peaks below, a few people sat on the main seats. One of them was an old man with a simple face. It was Guan Chong. Slowly, he said, "Aren't we going to wait for Sect Master to come out?" "There's no need." A person on the main seat said calmly, "My Shushan sword has not been unsheathed for too long. Many people have already forgotten who is in charge of the 9 Heavens Sword Union. Let's just tell them today." The few people present nodded and stood up. Their swords that could cleave the heavens and split the earth were released. They tore through the void before them and disappeared. Qingling mountain ranges Tianjia Peak. Let's go. Chapter 478. Before becoming an essence soul, Lin Feng's speed in breaking through space and flying was already extremely fast. Now that he has become an essence soul, his speed is even more astonishing. The distance of 10,000 miles, but in the blink of an eye, from Kunlun Mountain to Lin Province in the east of the Great Qin Dynasty, the distance of several 100,000 miles was covered in an instant. After hearing the location of the gathering from the Solar Luminary Sword Venerable, Lin Feng was even more certain of his guess. There was a 90% chance that this gathering was targeted at the Mount Shu Sword Sect. In terms of geography, the Lin Province and the Shu Province where the Mount Shu Sword Sect was located were on opposite ends of the Great Qin Dynasty. Although the 9 Heavens Sword Union was mostly united, it was never peaceful internally. Various factions were also trying to stir up trouble. For example, the Sun Moon Sword Sect had always been close to the Great Qin Dynasty. They were also known as the representative of the Great Qin Dynasty in the 9 Heavens Sword Union. As far as Lin Feng knew, the Great Qin Dynasty was not peaceful at the moment. The suppression of the imperial family on the aristocratic families was becoming more and more obvious, and the conflict between the two sides was becoming more and more intense. The conflicts were endless, and the undercurrents were turbulent. Fundamentally speaking, although the aristocratic families were powerful, they could not play tricks with the entire Great Qin Dynasty. However, firstly, the aristocratic families had deep roots, and were one with the Great Qin Dynasty. Their relationship was complicated, and the slightest pull could affect the previous one. Secondly, there were many other major factions who wanted to restrict the Great Qin Dynasty and secretly supported these aristocratic families, preventing the Great Qin Dynasty from acting freely. But from the latest news, the Great Qin Dynasty was determined to act this time. Other than the four aristocratic families, the other small and medium-sized aristocratic families had been dealt a heavy blow. Among the four aristocratic families, there was the Hua family, which was out of place, but was closer to the imperial family. As a result, the aristocratic families that had been rampant in the Great Qin dynasty for thousands of years felt like they were in a precarious situation. These people naturally would not wait for death. They all had their own plans. A storm was about to arrive in the Great Qin dynasty, and the other factions were watching from the side. The imperial family naturally would not allow themselves to be cleaned up while they were surrounded by wolves. They had to prevent others from taking advantage of the situation. This was the result of the gathering before them. Lin Feng arrived near the Tianjia peak of the Green Caltrip mountain range. After he released his aura of magic power, the Tianjia peak immediately reacted. A dazzling golden sword light soared into the sky and landed in front of Lin Feng. It turned into a handsome and elegant young man. Sect leader Lin, long time no see. The young man smiled. It was the sect leader of the Sun-Moon Sword sect. Although he had the appearance of a young man, he was already a primordial soul expert who had been famous for thousands of years. The disciples of the Sun-Moon Sword sect could fuse the solar glory and lunar splendor dual swords together, and the effect of 1 + 1 was far greater than 2. But even if they were fighting alone, the sword cultivators of the Sun-Moon Sword sect were still extremely powerful. The Solar Glory Sword Venerable was a great sword cultivator who looked down on all heroes, and was not the slightest bit weaker than other experts of the same cultivation level. A smile also appeared on Lin Feng's face. It's my honor to have the Luminous Sword Venerable personally welcome me. For this gathering, no one brought along their disciples. The Solar Glory Sword Venerable smiled and said, "It's just a few of us old farts gathering in private." Lin Feng nodded and walked side by side with the Solar Glory Sword Venerable. They landed on the Tianjia peak of the Green Caltrip mountain range below. The Tianjia peak was the main peak of the southern foothills of the Green Caltrip mountain range. The mountain was long, and there was an obvious crack from halfway up the mountain to the peak in the center. It was like a wheel mark, but it was incomparably huge. It was as if the wheels of a god's chariot had run over it, hence the name Tianjia Peak. When they reached the peak, they saw a middle-aged man in white standing there silently. There was a faint smile on his face as he watched Lin Feng and the Solar Glory Sword Venerable walk over together. This person's temperament was extremely special. It constantly fluctuated between extreme hardness and extreme softness, and it was unpredictable. It was like soft drifting snow, but also like an extremely sharp longsword, cold and sharp. As he stood there, it was as if he had formed a world of his own. In that world, wind and snow flew, and he was covered in silver. Upon closer inspection, the falling snowflakes were like boundless icy sword lights that flickered incessantly. If one looked at it for a long time, they would feel that the icy sword lights had already invaded the Great Thousand Worlds, turning the Great Thousand Worlds into snowflakes. The Solar Glory Sword Venerable introduced, "This is the Flying Snow Sword Venerable." The middle-aged man in white looked at Lin Feng, and his eyes flickered. He smiled and said, "Master of the Celestial Gate, I have long heard of your name." Without the introduction by the Solar Glory Sword Venerable, Lin Feng already knew the background of this person just by sensing his sword intent. The Flying Snow Sword Venerable was not a big shot of the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance, but a rogue cultivator. He reached the primordial spirit realm alone with a single sword. He was one of the few powerful experts outside of the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance who reached the primordial spirit realm through the sword Tao. Moreover, his cultivation was above that of the Solar Glory Sword Venerable. He was a great sword cultivator at the second tier of the primordial spirit realm, refining his spirit to return to the void. In the past, when he was still at the first tier of the primordial spirit realm, he became a super consecrator of the Great Qin Empire. His sword Tao was outstanding, and he was sharp in killing. 1,000 years ago, he was infamous, and he was a sharp sword of the Great Qin Empire. In the recent 1,000 years, he gradually disappeared, and there was little news about him. So it turned out that he had gone into seclusion to break through to the second tier of the primordial spirit realm. Now that he had successfully broken through and refined his spirit to return to the void, he had finally come out of seclusion. This great sword cultivator that belonged to the great Qin dynasty had appeared here. The meaning of this gathering was self-evident. Just as I expected. Lin Feng looked at the flying snow sword venerable, and then at the solar glory sword venerable. He knew that his previous guess was correct. The purpose of this gathering was for the Shushan sword sect. I have long heard of the great name of the flying snow sword venerable. After Lin Feng greeted the flying snow sword venerable, he walked forward with the solar glory sword venerable. In the air, there was a slight ripple, and the three of them had already stepped into a miniature alternate dimension. Wind and snow fluttered in the space. This was a miniature sword world space that the host, Flying Snow, had condensed with his spiritual power and sword intent. The moment the solar glory sword venerable entered, Flying Snow laughed. The moment you entered, my place became unstable. Lin Feng and the solar glory sword venerable smiled when they heard that. The solar glory sword Dao of the solar glory sword Dao transformed into a sword intent that was like sunlight, and it clashed with the sword intent of the flying snow sword Dao. This was because the flying snow sword venerable's cultivation was higher than his. If the two of them were at the same cultivation level, this clash might cause a huge ripple in the sword world. The solar glory sword venerable laughed. Therefore, 1,000 years ago, I never went to your place as a guest. The flying snow sword venerable laughed when he heard that. Lin Feng looked at them and thought to himself, the two of them probably knew each other when they were still young. I wonder who was the one who influenced who when they got close to the great Qin Empire. After entering the sword world, he saw that there were already people waiting inside. One of the elders turned around and saw the flying snow sword venerable and the solar glory sword venerable accompanying Lin Feng in. He immediately stroked his beard and laughed. Is this the Xian sect master? The cultivators here did not conceal their sword intent aura. Lin Feng scanned with his divine sense and felt that this elder's sword intent was like a path to heaven. It overcame all difficulties and cut through brambles and thorns, all the way up to the 9 heavens. His sword intent pierced through the 9 heavens, becoming one with heaven and earth. It was the sword Dao of the Heavenly Sword Sect. The Heavenly Sword Sect was also a part of the 9 Heavens Sword Alliance. Its strength was above the Sun Moon Sword Sect, Celerita's Sword Sect, and other factions. In the 9 Heavens Sword Alliance, the Heavenly Sword Sect was firmly in second place. The profoundness of the sword Dao, the number of experts, and the massive faction was second only to the Shushan Sword Sect. In the Heavenly Sword Sect, there were 5 great sword cultivators who had reached the primordial soul realm, and the elder in front of him was at the same realm as Venerable Flying Snow. They had both reached the second tier of the primordial soul realm. Sword Venerable Solar Glory introduced from the side. This is the Heavenly Sword Sect's Elder Immortal Sword. The elder stroked his beard and laughed. The sect master of the Shushan sect is currently in seclusion. He really can't split himself, so I had to make a trip here. I hope that fellow Taoists don't mind. Sword Venerable Flying Snow shook his head and laughed. Elder Immortal Sword coming out of the Heavenly Sword Mountain is even rarer than Sword Venerable Heavenly Sword. We will only welcome you with open arms. Hearing how Sword Venerable Solar Glory and Sword Venerable Flying Snow addressed the elder, Lin Feng was enlightened. He knew who this person was. Elder Immortal Sword, the Heavenly Sword Sect's Supreme Elder. He had cultivated for more than 10,000 years and was extremely senior. The current sect master of the Heavenly Sword Sect was 2 generations younger than him. After Lin Feng greeted Elder Immortal Sword, Sword Venerable Solar Glory introduced him to the other great sword cultivators in the sword world. Oh. Interesting. After one round, Lin Feng's expression did not change, but he felt that it was interesting. The 9 Heavens Sword Alliance, including the Shushan Sword Sect, was made up of a total of 9 sword sections. And in this gathering, there were as many as 6 members of the 9 Heavens Sword Alliance. Other than the Heavenly Sword sect and the Sun-Moon Sword sect, there was also the Thunderbolt Sword sect, the Constellation Sword sect, the Vast Sea Sword sect, and the Celeritas Sword sect. These 6 sects, together with the Shushan Sword sect, the Wilderness Sword sect, and the Blaze Sword sect, formed the complete Nine Heavens Sword Alliance. Among them, the Sun-Moon Sword sect had always been on good terms with the Great Qin dynasty, and the Heavenly Sword sect was the second mountain in the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance other than the Shushan Sword sect. The Thunderbolt Sword sect had always been the ally of the Heavenly Sword sect. This time, there was also a primordial soul realm cultivator participating in the gathering. What was worth noting was that this person was not the sect master, Sword Venerable Thunderbolt, but the newly advanced primordial soul realm expert of the Thunderbolt Sword sect, Ben Lazy. This surprised the other great sword cultivators. The Thunderbolt Sword sect was strong to begin with, and the Thunderbolt Sword Venerable was at the second tier of the primordial soul realm. At this moment, there was actually another primordial soul expert in the sect, causing the Thunderbolt Sword sect's strength to rise a step further. Ben Lazy was originally one of the top Yuanying sword cultivators in the Thunderbolt Sword sect, and was thought to be one of the most promising candidates to reach the primordial soul realm. For such a joyous event where someone in the sect reached the primordial soul realm, they would usually invite their fellow Taoists to attend and celebrate. Who knew that the Thunderbolt Sword sect would actually hide the news this time? If not for Ben Lazy attending this gathering, no one would have known that he had actually successfully reached the primordial soul realm. Although the Thunderbolt Sword Venerable had not arrived, Ben Lazy's arrival this time had already expressed the Thunderbolt Sword sect's attitude. But what made Lin Feng even more interested was that his old acquaintance, the Flowing Light Sword Venerable, was also here. All along, in the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance, the Flowing Light Sword sect and the Blaze Sword sect were the Shushan Sword sect's staunchest supporters and followers. Chapter 479. Swordsman Flowing Light was still the same. His face was like jade, his black hair was like a waterfall, and he looked to be in his 40s. 2 strands of snow-white hair hung down from the sides of his temples, and his eyes were full of majesty. He was standing there quietly at this moment. Not only did he attract the attention of Lin Feng, the other great sword cultivators also felt slightly surprised in their hearts. If the Wilderness Sea Council accepted the invitation, then it was normal. But the appearance of the Celeritas swordsman Flowing Light here was obviously a surprise, and it was hard to avoid many speculations. Swordsman Flowing Light himself was calm, and in the process of talking with others, he was calm as usual. Compared to Swordsman Flowing Light, although the arrival of Star Swordsman was also noticed, it was not so eye-catching. Within the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance, Star Swordsman sect and Wilderness Sword sect were relatively neutral, and also relatively independent. They were not too close to Shu Mountain, but they were not too close to other big powers outside of the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance. However, the Constellation Sword sect in the past wasn't within the borders of the Grand Qin dynasty, and it had once undergone a great migration before settling down in the territory of the Grand Qin dynasty. In a certain sense, it owed the Grand Qin dynasty a great favor. From this point of view, it was not too surprising that the Star Swordsman sect would lean towards the Great Qin dynasty at a critical moment. Compared to the arrival of Star Swordsman sect, the Canghai Sword sect also came, which attracted Lin Feng's attention, and he could decipher many things from it. Within the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance, the Canghai Sword sect was a bit different, because the location of the Canghai Sword sect was far above the South Sea. Geographically speaking, it was the only large sword sect that was not in the Great Qin dynasty. On the contrary, the Canghai Sword sect was actually within the sphere of influence of the Great Zhou dynasty, so just like how the Sun-Moon Sword sect was seen as the representative of the Great Qin dynasty's royal family, the Canghai Sword sect had always been seen as a grain of sand that the Great Zhou dynasty had mixed into the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance. After the Great Zhou dynasty eliminated the power of the aristocratic families and sects, and highly centralized power, the Canghai Sword sect was one of the few large sects that still had a foothold in the Great Zhou dynasty. Due to all these reasons, the Canghai Sword sect had a special position in the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance. It was slightly estranged from the other sword sects, including Mount Shu. Usually, during the alliance meeting, the Shanghai sword sect kept a low profile and did not have much of a presence. However, this did not mean that the Shanghai sword sect was weak. There were many experts in the Shanghai sword sect, and it had always been regarded as the third greatest sword sect in the world, second only to Shu Mountain and Tongtian. The person from the Shanghai sword sect who came this time was a Yuanying cultivator. He was the only one who had not reached the primordial soul realm among the people present. He very humbly expressed that he was here to listen to the decision made by the group of big shots. Any decision would represent the Shanghai sword sect, and he was willing to follow them. Lin Feng looked at this person and thought to himself, is this the attitude of the great Zhou dynasty? Perhaps Liang Pan, Zhu Hongguo, and the others will not sit by and watch the Qin dynasty clean up its own internal problems to increase its strength, but they have also made their stand against the Mount Shu sword sect. Perhaps they will not interfere personally, but the Shanghai sword sect will participate. As far as Lin Feng knew, the relationship between the great Zhou dynasty and the Mount Shu sword sect was not harmonious. It could only be said that it was passable on the surface. The discord between the two started from the battle of vanquishing Buddhism decades ago. Unlike the Taishu Temple, which only had the support of the Grand Supreme Formation breaking drum, the Mount Shu sword sect had personally taken action, causing the destruction of the Great Tempest Monastery, which was also one of the 3 sacred grounds. In the end, Mount Shu had suffered great losses as well. The Lunar Sword Venerable had died on the spot, and to this day, no one from the Lunar Sword lineage could advance to the second tier of the primordial soul realm to take over. However, in the end, the gains did not make up for the losses. The great Zhou dynasty rose up by stepping on the ruins of the Great Tempest Monastery, and the fruits of victory were almost all in the hands of the great Zhou dynasty. This made the Mount Shu sword sect extremely dissatisfied. As Lin Feng thought to himself, he chatted with the few great sword cultivators. None of them mentioned anything against Mount Shu. They were simply exchanging their insights on sword Dao and Dao techniques. It was as if it was really as Solar Luminary Sword Venerable had said, a gathering of ordinary sword cultivators to exchange pointers on their sword Dao cultivation. To them, as long as they were here, they had already made their stance clear. There was no need to say anything else. Lin Feng did not speak much as he was in the middle. He only displayed a little of the sword intent that he had comprehended from that ferocious sword. However, just this brief display was enough to attract the attention of the great sword cultivators. However, after that, Lin Feng did not display it anymore, leaving the great sword cultivators at the primordial soul realm unable to hold back their curiosity. Lin Feng's sword intent seemed to have revealed a brand new world to them, a brand new path. Sect leader Lin, may I have a word with you? Sword Venerable Flying Snow was also very tempted by the sword intent that Lin Feng displayed. However, he quickly suppressed his restless sword heart and said solemnly, His Majesty, Emperor Qin, has something that requires sect leader Lin's help. Lin Feng took a glance at Sword Venerable Flying Snow and nodded slightly. The sword world that everyone was currently in was formed from Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow's magic power and sword intent. With a thought, Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow had already broken through the void with Lin Feng and arrived at another alternate dimension. When the other big shots saw this, their expressions remained unchanged. They were just guessing why Emperor Qin's Stonefeather was looking for Lin Feng. Then Lazy and Old Sword Immortal looked at each other. The same thought flashed in their eyes, I'm afraid it has something to do with the sword Dao of the Master of Xian Men. Flying Snow confirmed the authenticity and uniqueness of his sword Dao before making the invitation. If the news of the Master of Xian Men's sword Dao being profound wasn't true, this might not have happened. Lin Feng had also thought of this point. Therefore, when he arrived in the void with Sword Venerable Flying Snow, he silently looked at Sword Venerable Flying Snow. Using his finger as a sword, Sword Venerable Flying Snow drew a circle of light in the air. Within the circle of light, a figure appeared. It was a middle-aged man wearing a crown and dragon robe. He was overflowing with the aura of an emperor. He was Emperor Qin Stonefeather. Stonefeather looked at Lin Feng and nodded. Sect Master Lin, I have a presumptuous request this time. I hope that you can help me. Lin Feng's expression was calm. He said indifferently, Dao friend, please speak. The light and shadow in front of him changed. Suddenly, a black fog spread out. Within the black fog, there was a vague five-colored radiance shooting out. Within the five-colored radiance, a true dragon could be seen roaming. Its dragon might was astonishing. Within the five-colored radiance of white, green, black, scarlet, and yellow, there seemed to be a long light shadow that could not be seen clearly. Lin Feng's brows twitched slightly. Even though he could not see the true appearance of the light shadow, Lin Feng could sense that this object was extremely huge. It was not accurate to say that it was huge. Its total volume was indeed huge, but in terms of appearance, it was mainly long. It was extremely long, so long that it was hard to imagine. Even with Lin Feng's perception after attaining the Essence Soul Realm, it was still a little hard to describe. This was because he could vaguely sense that this object's length was probably hundreds of thousands of kilometers, or even millions of kilometers. Such a length could not be described with the general meaning of length. This was because it was very difficult to use something that was similar to the length as an analogy. Looks like the news is not false. This should be the Great Qin dynasty's trump card, their national treasure. Lin Feng understood. He had previously received news that in order to deal with the increasingly turbulent situation, the Great Qin dynasty was preparing to refine their own national treasure. This treasure had actually existed a long time ago. Like the Great Zhou dynasty's Grand Imperial Palace, it was a primordial inheritance. However, at that time, it had not been completely refined. It was an incomplete product. Afterward, it landed in the hands of the Great Qin dynasty, and the imperial family had always hoped to refine it completely. However, this treasure could be said to have been plagued with mishaps, and they had never been able to completely refine it. In the most recent war between the human race and the demon race, it had suffered severe damage. But looking at it now, in these thousands of years, the imperial family of the Great Qin dynasty had always been preparing in secret. As they repaired the damage, they also hoped to completely refine this treasure. The reason why the imperial family of the Great Qin dynasty had been low profile and weak in recent years was very likely because they had invested too many resources into this treasure. It was still an incomplete product, but through the void, Lin Feng could faintly feel the powerful concept of power of this treasure. It was filled with a supreme aura that was insurmountable, indestructible, and could suppress all the worlds in the world. It had an inextinguishable fate. No wonder Liang Pan and Zhu Hongwu were so anxious, spending so much effort to seize Yude Minghua. If the Grand Imperial Palace doesn't continue to improve, when this treasure is completely refined, they probably won't be a match for it. Silently, Lin Feng looked at the shadow in the black fog and didn't say a word. Sword Venerable Flying Snow stood beside him and looked at the shadow with admiration in his eyes. Suddenly, a hint of darkness flashed past his eyes. Excuse me for a moment, Sword Venerable Flying Snow said. The voice of Qin Emperor Stone Feather came from the other side of the shadow. Flying Snow, go handle it yourself. Sword Venerable Flying Snow nodded at Lin Feng and stepped into the void to leave this space. Stone Feather's voice came over. I have troubled Sect Master Lin to come over this time because I want to ask Sect Master Lin to make a move. Silently, Lin Feng said, make a move. That's right. Stonefeather said, truth be told, what is placed before Sect Master Lin now is the supreme magic treasure of my Great Qin that can suppress the karmic luck of a nation. In the past, my Great Qin relied on this treasure to obtain the nation. It's a pity that the road to happiness is strewn with setbacks. This treasure has never been truly refined until today. Finally, there's some improvement. Lin Feng's tone was indifferent. The heavenly Tao is balanced. After thousands of trials and tribulations, once it appears in the world, it will surpass countless mortals. I should congratulate fellow Taoist. Thank you for your blessings, Sect Master Lin. Stonefeather continued, I heard Imperial Uncle Zhong Yu and Xing Do mention that Sect Master Lin has the supreme sword Dao and has the intent to destroy the world. Therefore, this time, I specially ask Sect Master Lin to make a move and help my great Qin to make this treasure appear in the world. At this moment, Lin Feng already completely understood Stonefeather's thoughts. This person wanted to borrow the sword intent of Lin Feng's peerless ominous sword to stimulate this supreme treasure of the great Qin dynasty and make it completely mature. Although this treasure was powerful, Lin Feng could sense that this was actually a treasure that was stronger in defense than offense. Not only was its defense powerful, but it also had the powerful intent of protecting everything and protecting all things in the world. My body is indestructible, and I should protect all things for eternity. Creation will not suffer from tribulations. Meanwhile, that ominous sword on Jade Capital Mountain just happened to be the opposite of it. It had the great destruction sword intent that could destroy everything in the world and slay creation. When it was attacked by the ominous sword, this treasure would stimulate all of its potential and thus reach its peak state. Of course, if it could not withstand it, then it would be completely destroyed by the ominous sword. However, if Lin Feng could freely control this sword, then the result would definitely be within a controllable range. Stonefeather said slowly, Sect Master Lin, please be generous in your assistance. My great Qin will definitely repay you generously. Chapter 480. As the ruler of a country, if Stonefeather said that there would be a generous reward, then it would naturally not be too shabby. However, even if the Qin dynasty did not give a reward, Lin Feng would still agree after putting on a show. It was very simple. The Qin dynasty wanted to use the ominous sword to form a blood bond with a magical treasure, and was that not the perfect whetstone for the ominous sword? The two sides were completely opposite in power. Lin Feng believed that this supreme magical treasure of the Qin dynasty was probably the best thing in the entire heaven primordial world for tempering the ominous sword besides the Shushan immortal sword Qi. Before, even though he had heard that the great Qin dynasty had such a treasure, but he had never actually seen it before and did not know its details. Now that he has clearly understood the concept of power contained within it, there is no way that Lin Feng would let go of such a perfect whetstone. As for the fact that the Qin dynasty's strength would soar after successfully forming a blood bond with such a treasure, and that it might become a potential enemy, Lin Feng believed that when the heaven-punishing sword was completely unsheathed and could be effectively controlled, his strength would grow even more terrifyingly. However, it was definitely not possible now. Lin Feng could feel that this magical treasure was not yet complete. The unbreakable and unbreakable protector concept of all to eternity was not complete. If not for this, it would not have been damaged during the war between the two worlds. Stonefeather also understood this. Today, he had only communicated with Lin Feng, and the two sides had come to an agreement. When I passed by Western Tomb City, you could have suggested this. Why wait until today? Lin Feng asked nonchalantly. Stonefeather said silently, back then, some things were not ready, so I did not mention it easily. But today, there's no harm in mentioning it. As he said this, a powerful wave of power passed through the void. Lin Feng's pupils constricted slightly. He saw a ball of golden light land before him. The golden light itself contained powerful spiritual power, and its purpose was to seal the thing within. Within the light was an independent lesser world. The starry sky was resplendent, and in the center of the galaxy, there was a true dragon. It was a primordial sky dragon with an extremely pure bloodline. Its body was close to 10,000 zhang long, and it was extremely powerful and huge. The majestic power of blood and qi emanating from it shook the universe. This was a primordial sky dragon that had attained the indestructible demon soul realm. Lin Feng scanned it and discovered that the primordial sky dragon was already dead. The pocket world of light stored its corpse. However, even though he was already dead, his corpse still emanated boundless power, and there were even great auspicious clouds floating around his body, exuding a heavy and dignified aura. Slowly, Qin Emperor Stonefeather said, "This is my great Qin's gift to sect leader Lin. This is just a token of appreciation." We will reward you when the time comes. How extravagant. Lin Feng thought to himself, the corpse of a primordial sky dragon is filled with treasures after its death. This entire sky dragon slough is indeed quite a hefty reward. A sky dragon corpse was nothing. A pure-blooded primordial sky dragon corpse was nothing either. However, a pure-blooded primordial sky dragon's corpse that had attained the indestructible demon soul realm and was extremely complete, with not a single dragon scale missing, was extremely valuable. Although the dark solitary skeleton that Lin Feng obtained in the Cloud Forest world was complete, it was only a skeleton. This sky dragon corpse before him had dragon scales, dragon bones, dragon blood, dragon flesh, dragon tendons, etc., all of it was complete. As the number one dynasty of the human race in the Divine Land in the past, the Great Qin dynasty's foundation was on full display at this moment. Just the deposit given to Lin Feng was an entire primordial sky dragon corpse that had attained the indestructible demon soul realm. Then, the resources they invested into that super Dharma treasure was imaginable. Lin Feng did not stand on ceremony either. With a flick of his sleeves, he directly swept up the golden ball of light and put it away. On the other side of the space, although Qin Emperor Stonefeather's expression did not change, his heart stirred slightly. He felt that his dharmic powers were instantly dispelled into nothingness by Lin Feng. He did not have any enmity. His dharmic powers turned into golden light and was only used to temporarily seal the sky dragon corpse. It did not have much power. However, for Lin Feng to dispel it so effortlessly, it still made him have a better understanding of Lin Feng's strength. After Lin Feng put away the sky dragon corpse, he said indifferently, "This seed agrees to this matter. It's just that looking at this Dharma treasure of yours, it's still some distance from the final step." Stonefeather answered frankly, "That's right. It still needs some time, but it's already right in front of us. At that time, I'll have to ask Sect Master Lin to make a move." Lin Feng stared at the illusion of light and shadow in front of him. His gaze passed through the layers of black mist and stopped on the image of the Dharma treasure that flashed with five-colored light. "Oh, I can indeed faintly sense the profoundness of the 9 glorious stars movement. When this Dharma treasure is fully activated, it can probably draw in the endless star power of the 9 glorious stars into its body as its driving force. This should be the result of Stonefeather refining a portion of the 9 glorious sky crumbling formation diagram into this Dharma treasure." As Lin Feng was analyzing this super Dharma treasure of the Great Qin dynasty, Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow returned to the Sword World at the peak of the Green Caltrip mountain range. The moment he arrived, he immediately realized that the situation was extremely tense. With Old Sword Immortal as the leader, a group of great sword cultivators stood together silently, facing off against another group of people in front of them. The person leading the other party was tall and burly, and he had an imposing aura. Just by standing there, he was like a huge sword that wanted to split the heaven and earth, extremely domineering and fierce. Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow took a deep breath. Venerable Little Shang. This person was the sword master of the Shaoshang sword lineage, the fiercest of the 6 lineages of Shushan sword sect, Venerable Little Shang. Beside him, there were 3 other great sword cultivators whose auras were in no way inferior to his. They stood there calmly. One of them had an elegant bearing and wore a smile on his face, but no one dared to belittle him. Clearly, he was standing there, but everyone present, including Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow, could not determine his true position. It was as if he was standing in many layers of time and space, representing countless possibilities and drifting about. Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow was expressionless. "Even Venerable Little Swordsman is here." Venerable Little Swordsman was the Sword Master Grandmaster of the 6 lineages of Shushan sword lineage. Venerable Little Swordsman was the most agile and nimble of the 6 lineages of Shushan sword lineage, and was even hailed as the fastest sword Dao in the Divine Land. Its evaluation was even above the Celeritas sword sect's instant sword escape and the Heavenly sword sect's heavenly sword escape. Venerable Little Swordsman was one of the few mystical abilities in the Divine Land that could allow cultivators below the Yuanying stage to traverse through space and assassinate. Most people thought that Shushan Little Swordsman was traversing through space and assassinating, while Celerita's sword sex instant sword escape was infused with the profound concept of time. But that was for sword cultivators who had yet to form their primordial spirit. On Venerable Little Swordsman, who was already at the second level of the primordial spirit realm, it was infused with the profound concepts of time and space, pushing Venerable Little Swordsman to the extreme. Beside the junior sword Venerable was an old man with a simple and solemn face. His eyes were dull, and he seemed like a stubborn rock. It seemed as if nothing could arouse his interest, but at the same time, nothing could make him waver. It was Venerable Guan Chong, who Lin Feng had met once before. After experiencing the calamity of the cloudy forest realm, Venerable Guan Chong had also recuperated in Shushan for a long time. Until now, his vitality had not completely recovered, but this time, he still rushed over. On the other side of Venerable Guan Chong was a middle-aged man dressed in hemp clothes, barefooted. The essence, spirit, and spirit of the Shushan sword cultivators were completely exposed, not concealed at all. The higher one's cultivation, the more it was so. The only exception was this hemp-clothed man. He did not emit any sword intent or spiritual power aura at all. He stood there normally, as if he was a mortal in the secular world. But the person Venerable Flying Snow and the others feared the most was this person. The sword master of Shushan's Li Meng sword lineage, Li Meng sword lineage. Among Shushan's 6 lineages sword lineage, Li Meng sword lineage was the most vicious and vicious. It had the most murderous and vicious aura. Its disciples were all numb to killing, and Venerable Fear's sword lineage himself was the great sword cultivator who killed the most in the entire Shushan. Ancient Killing God sect, Southern Border Hua clan, Reincarnation sect, and Azura Path did not dare to boast about killing in front of Li Meng's sword lineage. Venerable Fear's sword lineage looked at Venerable Flying Snow calmly, and said expressionlessly, "Flying Snow, long time no see. You have finally refined your spirit to return to the void." Venerable Flying Snow was similarly expressionless. He only felt a tearing pain in the depths of his primordial spirit. That pain was not real, but it was deeply imprinted in the memories of Venerable Flying Snow's consciousness. 2,000 years ago, Venerable Flying Snow, who was still at the first tier of the primordial spirit realm, had once fought with Venerable Fear's sword lineage. In the end, he was defeated by the other party's sword, and was even nearly killed on the spot. Even though Old Sword Immortal and the others looked calm, their gazes had turned solemn. Shushan's 6 pulse swords, the 6 great sword masters, were all at the second tier of the primordial spirit realm, great sword cultivators at the void return realm. Other than Venerable Lunar Sword, who had died in battle at the Great Thunderclap Monastery, and Venerable Xiaoyang, who had stayed in Shushan after Sect Master Exa and Longsheng went into seclusion, the other 4 were all present. Other than these 4 great sword cultivators at the second tier of the primordial spirit realm, Shushan also had a few experts at the first tier of the primordial spirit realm present. Even though this gathering, which was led by Venerable Flying Snow and Venerable Brilliant Sword Sage, did not state it explicitly, it was obvious that it was targeted at Shushan. But when Venerable Xiaoshang and the others arrived, the others immediately felt the strength and overbearing dominance of Shushan. This was a colossus that required the other 8 members of the 9 Heavens Sword Union to join forces in order to barely resist. It was a powerful sect that even the entire Great Qin dynasty would have to use all their strength to resist. It was the #1 Sword Dao sect in the world, alongside the Taishu Temple and the Great Thunderclap Monastery, as one of the 3 sacred grounds of the human cultivation world. The tall and burly Venerable Xiaoshang laughed boldly and said, "We have come uninvited, so please forgive us. It's just that, for fellow sword cultivators to gather here today, I wonder if there's something big happening." Venerable Brilliant Sword Sage said calmly, "What big thing can there be? It's just a group of fellow sword cultivators having an exchange of sword Dao and learning from each other." Venerable Xiaoshang smiled slightly and said, "Oh? Then we can be considered to be coincidentally here, so let's join in the fun. I believe fellow Taoists won't mind." Before Venerable Flying Snow and Venerable Brilliant Sword Sage said anything, Venerable Xiaoshang laughed loudly, "What's there to mind? Thousands of swords in the world come out of Shushan, and this is a sword Dao alliance. How can it be proper without Shushan? The moment he said that, the expressions of Old Sword Immortal, Venerable Flying Snow, Ben Lazy, Venerable Star Constellation, and the others changed. Who knew that Venerable Xiaoshang's character was just as overbearing as his Xiaoshang sword? He did not leave any leeway for others and said, "We sword cultivators are decisive in killing, so we should make friends with our swords." An exchange of the way of the sword is not something that can be achieved through words alone. Let's have a real spar. He glanced sideways at Venerable Flying Snow and the others and laughed, "My Shushan will be the arena master. Who wants to fight with us?" As he said that, an overbearing sword chi rushed into the sky and directly slashed through the sword world that Venerable Flying Snow had set up. Chapter 481. As Sword Venerable Little Shang laughed out loud, a domineering and ferocious sword chi soared into the sky. It actually caused a crack to appear in the small world formed by Sword Venerable Flying Snow's sword intent and magic power. Amidst the flying snow, a crack suddenly appeared in the sky. It was as if a wound had appeared in this small world. It was mournful and dazzling. Venerable Flying Snow's expression turned ashen. The wind and snow within the sword world continued to howl, instantly turning berserk. However, they did not attack Venerable Little Shang. Even if the wind and snow blew past revered swordsman of Little Shang, it had no intention of attacking him. This was because Sword Venerable Li Meng, who looked like an ordinary person, had his sword intent firmly locked onto Sword Venerable Flying Snow, causing Sword Venerable Li Meng to not dare to be distracted at all. Everyone knew that Sword Venerable Li Meng didn't use his weapon, but once he did, he would definitely kill. Li Xiong of Mount Shu only needed one sword to kill. Usually, when he hid thousands of sword chis in his body, he had to endure the endless pain of being cut by thousands of blades. Before hurting the enemy, he would hurt himself first. However, in the instant that he drew his sword, all of his sword will and dharmic powers burst forth. The swift and fierce attack that targeted a single point of attack could be said to be the best among the 6 lineages of Shushan. Honorable Swordsman Li said calmly, "The Swordsman Li of Shushan never leaves anyone alive. Flying Snow, in the past, when you and I were both at the first level of the primordial spirit realm, you managed to survive a single strike from me. I have always been looking for an opportunity to fight with you again." At this point, Sword Supremacy Li Meng suddenly laughed. "But after I refined my spirit to revert to the void, killing you, who was only at the first tier of the primordial soul realm, was really boring. Over the past 1,000 years, I've been waiting for you to attain the second tier of the primordial soul realm. Let us see the outcome of our unfinished battle 2,000 years ago today." Hearing that, Sword Venerable Flying Snow turned silent. Slowly, he closed his eyes. The sword world formed from his magic power and sword intent suddenly melted away. Everyone found themselves in the void. Venerable Sword Flying Snow reopened his eyes and looked at Venerable Sword Li Meng calmly, "Please." As he said this, a faintly discernible sword will spread out from his body and collided with the ominous swordsman's aura which was about to explode. On the Shushan side, the junior sword lord, who had the mildest temperament, cast his gaze towards the heavenly sword sex Elder Sword Immortal. He smiled faintly and said, "Elder Sword Immortal, you should be enjoying your fortune on the heavenly mountain. Why did you come all the way here?" Although his tone was gentle, the fact that he had spoken made Sun Luminary Sword Venerable and the others shudder. They knew that this Sword Master Grandmaster of Lesser Rule Swords was about to make a move as well. Old Sword Immortal stroked his beard and smiled. "I'm just a bag of old bones, so I have to move them. Otherwise, they will really rust." Junior Sword Venerate shook his head and laughed. "Since that's the case, since it's rare for you to come out of the sky-piercing mountain, I naturally have to seize the opportunity to spar with you. Otherwise, I don't know when the next time will be." Old Sword Immortal, who had white hair and a ruddy complexion, did not have the slightest hesitation. He said straightforwardly, "Of course. Your esteemed Sex Shaozi Sword Artifact, my Heavenly Path Sword Sex Great Tao Heavenly Path Sword, plus the Celeritas Sword Sex Instant Sword Escape are publicly acknowledged as the 3 fastest Sword Tao abilities in the vast divine continent. Today, this old man will compete with Shaozi Sword Venerable to see who is faster. Junior Sword Venerate glanced at Celeritas Sword Venerate at the side, smiling faintly. This matter has long been publicly agreed upon. Let's verify it today. At the side, Junior Sword Venerate was also staring at Celeritas Sword Venerate, continuously shaking his head. Old friend, why are you doing this? The two of them had been friends for many years. Back then when Junior Sword Venerate ascended the cloud-traversing peak, he even left behind a sword mark that contained the sword intent of his junior rule swords. By observing this sword mark, others could more or less understand some of the mysteries of the junior rule swords. The Celeritas Sword Sect also participating in this alliance meeting against Shushan was out of the expectations of many people. Celeritas Sword Venerate stood with his hands behind his back, his expression calm. Why ask when you already know the answer? The smile on Junior Sword Venerate's face gradually disappeared, he was also silent. Only after a long while did he lightly sigh. Ever since you took over the Celeritas Sword Sect, you have been increasingly alienated from my Shushan. I was also forced to do so. Silently Sword Venerate Flowing Light said, what you said is right, but at that time I had no enmity towards Shushan. I only hoped that the Celeritas Sword Sect could walk its own path and not always be under the shadow of Shushan, following them around like a servant. The Blaze Sword Sect is happy to walk this path, I am not. Celeritas Sword Venerate Flowing Light's tone was calm from beginning to end. But I never thought that Shushan would be so overbearing, to actually be unable to even tolerate this little request of my Celeritas Sword Sect. When Celeritas Sword Venerate Sunlight and the others heard this, their faces all revealed a thoughtful expression, thinking in their hearts, Junior Sword Venerate Flowing Light left a sword mark for the Celeritas Sword Sect. On the surface it seems to be friendship, but thinking deeper, I'm afraid it doesn't have any good intentions. Junior Sword Venerate Flowing Light snorted. Aren't you still going to rely on the Qin dynasty right now? Open your eyes and see clearly, no matter if it's the Qin dynasty or the Great Zhou dynasty, the thorns in their eyes are not only the aristocratic powers, but also the major sections. Celeritas Sword Venerate Flowing Light nodded his head, glancing at Celeritas Flying Snow who was facing off with someone and Celeritas Sword Venerate Sunlight who was beside him. He said with emotion, what you said is right, so no matter what, we have to thank the existence of Shushan. Even if they are grateful, they will not continue to walk together with Shushan, gradually becoming a vassal of Shushan. And it is precisely because of the pressure brought by Shushan that even if the sky falls there is this big guy to hold it up. The Qin dynasty instead does not dare to make things difficult for the Celeritas Sword Sect, and even more enthusiastically tries to win them over and give preferential treatment. This already has nothing to do with personal friendship. It is completely a choice made by the person at the helm of a large sect that is most in line with the interests of his own sect. At the very beginning Celeritas Sword Venerate Flowing Light did not want his sect to become a vassal of Shushan. His original plan was perhaps only to adjust the Celeritas Sword Sect's general policy, turning it into a middle ground like the Constellation Sword Sect and the Wilderness Sword Sect. But the Shushan Sword Sect's response, using Celeritas Sword Venerate Little Shang to scheme against Celeritas Sword Venerate Flowing Light enraged this great sword cultivator, making him change his mind and choose to lean towards the Qin dynasty. Celeritas Sword Sect definitely does not wish for Shushan to be destroyed. If that happens, it will be hard to avoid the result of the dogs being cooked when the hares are dead. But he is clearly very willing for Shushan to be taught a lesson, making Shushan restrain its overbearing style. Celeritas Sword Venerate Little Shang is expressionless, so, at the lakeside of the North Wind Sea, you deliberately lost the sword scar inscription I left for you to the master of Xian Gate? Shushan's Sword Venerate Little Shang is truly extraordinary. Even knowing that it will block my path of advancement, it still deeply attracts me. Celeritas Sword Venerate Flowing Light sighed, but it is also because I gave up your sword scar inscription that I finally walk back on the right track. Just as he was speaking, Celerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light's body suddenly emitted a dazzling brilliance, transforming into a ray of light, flickering in the air, its whereabouts uncertain. This was the primordial spirit avatar that Celerita's sword Venerate Little Shang had cultivated, the instantaneous flowing light sword Tao. At this moment, he manifested his primordial spirit avatar not to fight Celerita's sword Venerate Little Shang, but to break through the bottleneck and advance to the second tier of the primordial spirit realm, the realm of refining the spirit to return to the void. In front of all the great sword cultivators, he had attained the second tier of the primordial spirit realm. Celerita's sword Venerate Little Shang's expression was solemn, but he did not stop Celerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light's actions. The ray of light formed by Celerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light's primordial spirit was originally flickering, but at this moment, it suddenly became clear. It streaked across the void and did not dissipate for a long time, gradually forming the outline of a figure. It was in the shape of a long sword. It did not have a physical body, only a silhouette formed by the light. However, it exuded an elusive and powerful intent of power. It was like a fleeting stream of light. That instant was so short that it flashed by in a hurry, difficult to grasp or capture. This long sword was like an independent world, floating outside the void of the heaven primordial world. Within the long sword, there were countless lights and shadows changing. In the time it took to snap a finger, it changed 60 times. Each light and shadow was a different image. When Celerita's sword Venerate saw this scene, he silently said, "Congratulations, fellow Taoist." Old Sword Immortal, Ben Lazy, Astral Constellation Sword Venerate and the others also said in unison, "Congratulations, fellow Taoist." Even Sword Venerate Little Shang sighed, "Old friend, congratulations." The group of primordial spirit experts congratulated him in unison. They congratulated Celerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light for successfully refining his spirit to return to the void, condensing his own void-returning Dharma body, and advancing to the second tier of the primordial spirit realm. Even Sword Venerate Little Shang gave up on Old Sword Immortal. He looked over and said with a smile, "If I remember correctly, this is the 5th cultivator in the entire Celerita's sword sect's history to refine his spirit to return to the void, right? In my lifetime, I have yet to spar with a second-tier primordial spirit realm cultivator from the Celerita's sword sect. Today, let me witness a void-returning realm cultivator's instantaneous sword escape." Sword Venerate Little Shang shook his head, "He is mine." As he said this, a majestic and domineering sword intense soared into the sky, shaking the entire void. Its target was Sword Venerate Flowing Light. Sword Venerate Flowing Light dispersed his void-returning Dharma body and regained his human form. The sharp and ethereal sword intense similarly aimed at Sword Venerate Little Shang. Sword Venerate Little Shang chuckled lightly, not getting angry. He turned to look at the heavenly sword sect's Old Sword Immortal and said with a smile, "I was just curious." "Old Sword Immortal, please don't blame me." Old Sword Immortal said indifferently, "How could that be? Even this old man has sparred with a void-returning realm cultivator from the Celerita's sword sect. It has already been several thousand years. Seeing it today, I am also a little moved." Sword Venerate Little Shang smiled faintly and did not say anything else. His figure flashed and his sword intent surged, instantly seeming to transform into several tens of himself. This was not the shadow clone technique, but rather Sword Venerate Little Shang pushing his sword Dao cultivation to the extreme. His primordial spirit escaped into many layers of space and time. It was the same logic as Lin Feng using Jade Capital Mountain to manifest many possibilities of time in the cloudy forest world. Seeing this, Old Sword Immortal also displayed his own great Dao heavenly sword technique. His body transformed into endless sword light, his aura surging like a bull. He instantly traversed through endless space and clashed with Sword Venerate Little Shang. At the same time, Sword Venerate Little Shang and Sword Venerate Flowing Light, Sword Venerate Fiercely and Sword Venerate Flying Snow also began their respective battles. Although Sword Venerate Flying Snow dispersed his sword realm, the group of primordial spirit big shots still remained in the void. They did not return to the great Thousand Worlds Divine Land's green Caltrip mountain ranges Tianjia Peak. With so many great sword cultivators proficient in killing engaging in a chaotic battle, it was impossible to destroy the divine land as a whole. However, completely destroying the Great Qin dynasty's Lin province and the entire Green Caltrip mountain range was no suspense. Only by using the void as a battlefield could a battle of this level be accommodated. And in another alternate dimension, Lin Feng also felt the commotion. His gaze narrowed slightly. Looks like there are uninvited guests. Chapter 482. Honorable swordsman Guan Chong had experienced the calamity of the cloudy forest realm and had yet to recover, so he could only stand by the side to guard the other three sword masters. But no matter how low-key he was still a sword cultivator who had refined his spirit to the void. As long as he stood there, he would be a deterrent, making others not dare to act rashly. Although the Great Qin dynasty did not make it clear that the gathering was organized this time, it was actually targeted at Shushan. They wanted to cause some trouble for Shushan within the Nine Heavens Sword Union. The Shushan sword sect naturally would not sit idly by when they heard the news. In the end, four Void Reversion Realm sword masters attacked together. Apart from them, there were also honorable swordsman Ning Lang and a group of first-tier primordial spirit realm sword cultivators. Shushan was deliberately establishing their might this time. The number of experts present was impressively more than all the sword cultivators attending the gathering combined, and they were even stronger. Honorable swordsman Tong Tian, honorable swordsman Thunderbolt, honorable swordsman Vast Sea, and some second-tier primordial spirit realm experts of the Great Qin dynasty did not come, causing an awkward scene at the gathering. Shushan, with the power of one sect, completely crushed the alliance of the other factions. Even if honorable swordsman Streamlight successfully broke through on the front lines, they only had 3 second-tier primordial spirit realm experts on their side. Coincidentally, Shushan's sword sect's strong attack this time was also very targeted, specifically targeting the Heavenly Sword sect, the Great Qin dynasty, and the Celeritas sword sect. As the second strongest sword sect in the Nine Heavens Sword League, the Heavenly Sword sect was naturally the focus of Shushan sword sect's suppression. They wanted to teach them who was the absolute boss of the Nine Heavens Sword League, and who was the #1 sword holy land in the world. The Great Qin dynasty was the instigator of this gathering targeting Shushan. The main culprit would definitely not let him off. Sword Honorable Li Xiong was really determined to kill this time. He wanted to kill Sword Honorable Flying Snow here and teach the Great Qin dynasty a lesson. Celerita's sword sect appeared as traitors, and would not be let off either. As for the Sun Moon sword sect, which was a vassal of Great Qin, and the Thunderclap sword sect, which was a vassal of the Heavenly Sword sect, the Constellation sword sect, which had always been neutral, and the Canghai sword sect, which was connected to the Great Zhou dynasty, mainly acted as a deterrent. In the endless void, the concept of distance seemed to have been lost. Countless sword lights flashed in the space, and the sky and earth were turned upside down. Old Immortal Sword, Sword Venerable Flying Snow, and Sword Venerable Streamlight were experts that had attained the second tier of the Essence Soul realm. Old Immortal Sword, in particular, had already attained the Tao 10,000 years ago. His great Tao leads to the Heavenly Sword had been cultivated to the point of perfection. But at this moment, the three of them were facing the 3 great sword masters of the Mount Shu sword sect, and they were all at a disadvantage. Sword Venerable Solar Luminary and the others frowned as they watched. Ben Lazy's expression was gloomy as he stared at Old Sword Immortal and Junior Sword Venerable. In the Mount Shu sword sect's camp, a man in brocade clothes with a hooked nose looked at Ben Lazy calmly. Why? Do you also want to come down and exchange swordsmanship? If you have this intention, I, Ning, will accept it. The Thunderbolt sword sect's Sword Dao has always been regarded as the most ferocious Sword Dao mystique apart from Mount Shu's Shaoshang sword. You seem to have recently attained the primordial spirit. I can help you test its quality. The person who spoke was Sword Venerable of Broken Mountain, Ning Lang. The way of the sword that he practiced was the Shaoshang sword. Although his tone was calm, it caused Ben Lazy's expression to change slightly. Ning Lang glanced at Ben Lazy and said silently, "Do you have any objections?" All the swords in the world come from Mount Shu. In the past, the founding ancestor of your Thunderbolt Sword sect personally came to Mount Shu's Shaoshang Peak to seek guidance. Why? Don't the people of the Thunderbolt Sword sect know about it? As though it was a footnote to Ning Lang's words, an extremely resplendent and vigorous sword light pierced through the heavens and earth in the void, erupting with a powerful energy that made everyone's heart tremble. Accompanying this sharp and ruthless sword light with spiritual energy, snowflakes suddenly fell from the endless void. Upon closer inspection, those snowflakes were actually condensed by Sword Venerable Flying Snow's sword will. But at this moment, the sword will was gradually dissipating. As the snowflakes fell, they constantly disintegrated and eventually disappeared without a trace. In the beginning, there were only a few snowflakes, but as time went on, they seemed to be endless. But no matter how many snowflakes there were, they could only end up with dust on the ground. This was the sword will condensed by Sword Venerable Flying Snow, but it was actually destroyed by someone at its core. It lost its original strength and concept, and eventually became rotten. In the void, a large amount of snowflakes gathered to form a white-robed middle-aged man. He was Sword Venerable Flying Snow. Even though his appearance did not change much, everyone present was an expert who had cultivated the sword Dao for thousands of years. They could tell that Sword Venerable Flying Snow had lost. At this moment, even though Sword Venerable Flying Snow's appearance did not change, his temperament seemed to have changed from a peerless divine sword that radiated with cold light to a rusty, empty shell of a piece of scrap metal. Sword Venerable Flying Snow looked at Sword Venerable Li Meng, who was slowly walking out of the dark space, and muttered to himself, 2,000 years of bitter cultivation is still not enough? Sword Venerable Sunlight and the others fell silent. Looking at Sword Venerable Li Meng, who seemed to have turned back into an ordinary person, they all felt their hearts sink. Most sword cultivators did not practice spiritual techniques or refine immortal treasures. They only used their long swords to battle the world. Even primordial spirit experts only used their swords and did not rely on external objects. This was because their attacks were sharp, and they were especially ferocious in fights. Their actual combat ability was usually outstanding among cultivators of the same realm. And Shushan Sword sect was even more so a model. Their name was praised throughout the ages. There had always been a private saying in the heaven primordial world that Shushan cultivators are one level higher. This meant that in actual combat, any Shushan sword cultivator could fight against other cultivators that were at least one small realm higher. The three tiers of the primordial spirit stage were primordial spirit incarnation, refined spirit to void, and void fusion. They were different from the early, middle, and late stages of the Yuanying stage, or the early, middle, and late stages of the Golden Elixir period and Foundation establishment stage. The difference between each tier was much greater. The difference in strength might not be an insurmountable chasm, but in terms of cultivation difficulty, the three primordial spirit stage were basically equivalent to the difference between three major realms. And among the Shushan cultivators, there had once been someone who proudly claimed that Shushan first-tier primordial spirit stage sword cultivators could fight against second-tier primordial spirit stage cultivators from other sections. Shushan refined spirit to void cultivators could fight against void fusion cultivators from other sections. This saying had never been publicly acknowledged by the Shushan sword sect, nor had it been verified. However, there would be no smoke without fire. The existence of such a rumor proved the strength of the Shushan sword Dao. The scene before them seemed to prove this point. Venerable swordsman Fluttering Snow, who was also at the second-tier primordial spirit stage, was defeated by Venerable swordsman Li Meng without a chance to retaliate. This scene seemed to serve as a warning to Venerable Solar Luminary and the others. What kind of colossus were they trying to fight against? Looking at the other two battles, it was even more chilling. Venerable swordsman Little Shang's incarnation spanned tens of thousands of feet like a celestial river. His cold and domineering sword light forced Venerable swordsman Streamlight, who was also at the second-tier primordial spirit stage, to the point that he could only use the speed advantage of the instant sword escape to dodge. He did not dare to face it head-on. An old sword immortal, who had tempered his dermic powers and sword Dao for 10,000 years, could not gain any advantage against venerable swordsman Little Shang, who was not even half his age. He was even forced into a disadvantageous position. The situation was getting more and more dangerous. Venerable swordsman Fluttering Snow's sword intent spread across the sky. It was ever-changing and had shocking destructive power. It could instantly shatter the entire void. Old Sword Immortal's great Dao heavenly sword had brilliant sword light that shot up into the 9 heavens. It was a power that pierced through the heavens and earth, completely ignoring the barriers of time and space. Celestial Light Sword Sect's instant sword escape comprehended the mysteries of time and grasped the true meaning of instant, one of the two extremes of time. It grasped the profound meaning of instant, which was 1/60th of a flick of a finger. The Thunderbolt Sword Sect's sword Dao was extremely violent and unyielding. The Constellation Sword Sect's sword Dao used the sword Dao to manifest the changes of thousands of stars. Every sword Dao contained great power, and each contained boundless profundities. However, in front of the Shushan sword Dao, all of them paled in comparison. Shushan's 6 meridian swords were all different, but all of them had reached the pinnacle within their own domain, becoming the pinnacle of similar sword Daos. And their source, the heavenly immortal sword Qi, was even stronger. It was so extensive that it contained all of the sword Daos of the divine land. All the swords in the world came from Shushan. It was an incomparably harsh sentence, but Old Sword Immortal, Ben Lazy, Venerable Sun Luminary, and the others could not refute it. Duanyu, don't waste your breath. Venerable Guan Chong said indifferently, we previously received news that the Mystic Gates sect master, Lin Feng, is also here. Other than the sky-piercing, Great Qin, and Liuguang families, this person is also the main person. Ning Lang nodded, with the 6 meridian swords gathered, this person can no longer be arrogant. Venerable Guan Chong said, although that Lin Feng's sword Dao is sharp, he did not dare to face sect master head-on in the cloudy forest world. It can be seen that the heavenly immortal sword Qi can restrain this person's sword Dao. Sect master said that his sword Dao is of great use to our Shushan, and this is our chance. That's right. If we can capture this person, it's naturally for the best. Ning Lang answered, even if we can't capture him, we have to get the foundations of his sword Dao out of him. Oh, so Shushan cares so much about me? The two of them conversed, and before their voices finished, a crack suddenly tore open in the void. Surging purple Qi gushed out from within. Following that, a figure dressed in purple robes slowly walked out from the spatial crack. It was Lin Feng. Seeing Lin Feng, Ning Lang's heart suddenly turned cold. Lin Feng's shocking sword that day surfaced in his mind again, making his heart palpitate. As a sword cultivator, his will was firm. Towards something that threatened him, his first reaction was not to fear and submit, but to kill the other party by all means possible. At this moment, facing Lin Feng again, thinking of how his side had sent out all the experts this time around, Ning Lang's heart instantly calmed down. Looking at Lin Feng, he said, you are also here to participate in this gathering to have an exchange of sword Dao? That couldn't be better. After our last meeting, I have always wanted to experience your sword Dao again. Lin Feng swept a glance over him, and then looked at the other Shushan sword cultivators. His gaze lingered on Honorable Swordsman Guan Chong, Honorable Swordsman Li, and the other 2 sword masters for a moment, a playful smile on his lips. What, only when you have enough people standing behind you will you have the courage to draw your sword? Ning Lang did not answer, but growled, draw your sword. He directly shed his human form, transforming into a huge bronze sword that was 10 meters long and as wide as a door. It was thick and powerful, fierce and domineering, and exuded a powerful aura. Immediately, Ning Lang pushed the power of his Shaoshang sword to the limit. Draw your sword. Lin Feng smiled. I had thought that you were a sword cultivator, and had some backbone. But now it seems that you are completely unworthy of my sword. Suddenly, a black and white taiji pattern appeared on his forehead, constantly intertwining and rotating. From the taiji diagram, tens of thousands of golden flames suddenly surged out, landing in the air, and instantly transforming into a fiery figure that faced Ning Lang. Chapter 483. Lin Feng himself stood motionless on the spot. A taiji symbol appeared on his forehead, and from the taiji symbol, large amounts of golden flames surged out. These golden flames rapidly transformed into a giant that was more than 200 zhang tall in the air. Its entire body shone with a dazzling golden light, as though thousands of golden needles had gathered together. It was extremely glaring. And these golden needles were all extremely condensed flames. One of the 7 great true fires in the world, the true sun fire god light. The moment this flame giant appeared in the air, a violent feeling of power shook the entire void, shocking everyone. This golden flame giant's robes fluttered in the wind, and his outer appearance was exactly the same as Lin Feng's. His facial features were also the same as Lin Feng's, except that be it his clothes or skin, they were all formed from dazzling golden flames. A sun-like symbol gradually appeared on the forehead of the flame giant Lin Feng, as though it was burning fiercely on his forehead. Standing in the void, he was like the sun, incomparably dazzling. For symbols heaven opening scripture, fire, great sun god fist. Without waiting for sword venerable of broken mountains Ning Lang to react, the golden flame giant Lin Feng directly punched out. The void suddenly exploded, and there was a fiery red. In the center of the spatial turbulence, there was only a blazing sun hanging high in the sky. Everything in the world returned to silence, and only this blazing sun shone like the sun in the sky, becoming the supreme ruler of this world, the one and only emperor. My light and heat give life to all living things, and my light and heat can also instantly destroy all living things. The life and death of all living things in the world depend on my words. Xu Shan's Shaoshang sword was fierce and forceful, incomparably domineering. It was the most ferocious sword Dao mystique in the divine land, but at this moment, facing this punch from Lin Feng, it actually felt powerless. If you are domineering, I will be even more domineering. This was the concept of the power of this punch from Lin Feng. The huge bronze sword formed by Ning Lang's primordial spirit seemed to have become a broken piece of straw at this moment, and was directly sent flying by Lin Feng's great sun god fist. The huge sword flew back thousands of li before it stopped moving. Its surface was covered in cracks like a spider web, and it was incomparably miserable. The edges of the sword began to shatter, and the giant sword wailed in despair. It was about to be completely shattered by Lin Feng's punch. Honorable swordsman Guan Chong quickly flashed to the side of the huge sword. He used his own Guan Chong sword's sword intent and dermic powers to stabilize the huge sword that was about to shatter. This huge sword was Ning Lang's primordial spirit incarnation. If he allowed it to shatter, Ning Lang would die here. A first-tier essence soul sword cultivator, sword venerable of broken mountains, Ning Lang of Mount Shu's Shaoshang swordsmithing faction, was almost killed by Lin Feng with a single punch. Even sword venerable solar luminary and the others were stunned by what they saw. When they looked at Lin Feng again, they could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. Isn't he a sword cultivator? Why does my primordial spirit avatar look like this? Wait, that's not right. Sun Luminary Sword Venerable's eyes widened. This isn't his nascent divinity incarnation at all. This is just one of his divine ability Dharmakaya. Ben Lazy, Star Constellation Sword Venerable, and the others gasped in unison. They saw 2 figures, one big and one small, standing in the void. The big one was naturally the giant formed from golden flames. The small one was standing silently behind the giant. It was Lin Feng himself. He was standing there perfectly fine, not revealing his primordial spirit avatar at all. The flame giant in front of him that had sent Ning Lang flying with a single punch was completely formed from his dermic powers. It had nothing to do with his primordial spirit avatar at all. This golden flame giant was known as the Great Sun Emperor. It was a divine ability Dharmakaya that was formed from the fist will of the Great Sun Divine Fist and his dermic powers of Lin Feng. It was the product of a divine ability Dharmakaya that had been cultivated to the extreme. Although its power was strong, it was only formed temporarily from dharmic powers. It could not even be considered a clone. It could barely be considered an external body. However, its power was much weaker than the primordial spirit avatar that a cultivator could truly manifest. To be able to cultivate a divine ability Dharmakaya, firstly, a primordial spirit cultivator had to cultivate their own divine ability Dharmakaya to the great perfection realm. Secondly, the divine ability itself had to be strong enough. There were very few techniques that could cultivate a divine ability Dharmakaya. Other than Lin Feng, there were other primordial spirit experts who had condensed their own divine ability Dharmakaya. Divine ability Dharmakaya had many benefits. It could be gathered and dispersed at any time. Even if it was damaged, it would not harm the foundation. However, it was not often used during the crucial moments of life and death. This was because it could weaken the power of the primordial spirit avatar. Usually, when using a divine ability Dharmakaya, it was either the two parties were just testing each other, or, when one party was far stronger than the other party, or when the main body could not leave, the divine ability Dharmakaya would travel far away and replace the main body to fight. However, for Lin Feng to use a divine ability Dharmakaya to almost shatter the primordial spirit avatar of Shushan's sword Venerable of Broken Mountains with a single punch, the power was truly terrifying. The void was distorted. Venerable Li Meng, who originally wanted to kill Venerable Flying Snow, gave up on his opponent and rushed towards Lin Feng. The sword will around his body surged and was extremely sharp. Last year, I wanted to go to Kunlun Mountain but was stopped by Taishu Temple. Today, I can finally get my wish. As Venerable Li Meng spoke, a dazzling cold light started surging from his body. In an instant, it was as though thousands of sword lights were shooting out from his body. His entire body was wrapped in sword lights, and he was filled with ferocity and killing intent. And in the void far away, a sword hum shook the sky. The brilliant sword lights were like the Milky Way flowing in reverse, tearing everything in front of it apart. It also slashed towards Lin Feng's head. It was Venerable Little Shang. He gave up on Venerable Flowing Light, who had been chasing after him, and also charged towards Lin Feng. Gathering chicken feathers to gather your courage. Ganging up on me. Lin Feng laughed. The divine ability avatar of the Great Sun Emperor in front of him waved its fist towards Venerable Little Shang. Lin Feng himself was still standing in the void, and the Taiji diagram on his forehead revolved again. Instantly, rays of jade light surged. As the waves surged, endless jade light extended towards the vast and boundless void. Very quickly, it turned into a jade-green tide, boundless and boundless. In the void, a sea suddenly appeared out of nowhere. As the tide rolled, there were suddenly huge waves. In the sea, there was a huge whirlpool that kept revolving. A huge amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy was sucked into this huge whirlpool. The whirlpool became bigger and bigger, until it finally expanded to a radius of 100 miles. At the bottom of the deep whirlpool, there was suddenly a shocking energy wave. A tall figure gradually rose up. Similar to the Great Sun Emperor, he was also over 200 feet tall. His facial features and clothing were exactly the same as Lin Feng himself. It was just that this tall figure was completely jade green, and it shone with a bright luster. Another divine ability avatar. Venerable Li Meng's eyes flashed fiercely. His ferocious sword will suddenly exploded, turning into a fierce sword light that pierced towards the giant rising from the jade sea. The sword light was incomparably resplendent. Within the sword light, countless sword chi and sword intense surged, and the sword will turned into a physical form. It was even more shocking and ferocious than Venerable Little Shang's Little Shang sword. For symbols heaven opening book, water, boundless sea art. That jade-green giant was called the Boundless Sea Emperor. It was a divine ability avatar formed from Lin Feng's Boundless Sea art. Facing the fierce Venerable Li Meng, it immediately went up. Whoosh! What was shocking was that the Boundless Sea Emperor avatar, which looked no weaker than the Great Sun Emperor, was actually sliced in half by Venerable Li Meng's sword light. Could it be that it is just for show? Just as this thought rose in the minds of the crowd, they saw the jade waves below the Boundless Sea Emperor. As the waves surged, the Boundless Sea Emperor's already broken body rapidly recovered to its original state. Ben Lazy seemed to wake up from a dream. The Jade Sea is endless, but this body is indestructible. Unless it can destroy the entire Jade Sea in one go, this divine ability avatar is immortal and can regenerate endlessly. Venerable Star Constellation Sword asked doubtfully, but how can it defeat the enemy with just strong regenerative abilities? At this moment, someone walked out from the Shushan camp. I will handle it. Martial Uncle, please attack the heart of the enemy. This was a great sword cultivator at the first tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm. His name was Venerable Moon Reflector, and he was currently the strongest cultivator of the Great Yin Sword faction. The entire Shushan had high hopes for him. Once he reached the second tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm, he would take over the title of Venerable Moon Sword Lord and become the new sword master of the Great Yin Sword faction. In fact, he was now temporarily in charge of the daily affairs of the Great Yin Sword faction. This person unleashed his swordsmanship cultivation of the Tai-Yin sword, entangling the reformed Boundless Ocean Emperor like clouds and mist. Without needing Venerable Moon Reflector to say anything, Venerable Li Meng had already taken advantage of the moment the Boundless Sea Emperor was destroyed to bypass the Jade Sea and attack Lin Feng himself. But the next moment, all his hair stood on end. He turned back in shock and saw the reformed Boundless Sea Emperor forming a sword seal with his right hand. Countless sword gleams burst forth from his body, and the ferocious sword will made everyone pale with fright. It was not that this sword was strong, but that this sword was a living replica of Shushan's Venerable Li sword. How is this possible? Venerable Li Meng was undoubtedly the most shocked person. In the entire Shushan, other than the third-tier primordial spirit transformation realm sect master Xian Longsheng and a few grand supreme elders, he was the strongest cultivator of the Venerable Li sword. He could tell at a glance whether the other party had imitated it or had truly comprehended the essence of this sword Tao. Although it was still a little shaky, although there were some changes, fundamentally, the sword that the Boundless Sea Emperor had used was the Venerable Li sword of Shushan. Venerable Moon Reflector hurriedly dodged, and Venerable Li Meng also forcefully stopped his forward momentum, evading the Boundless Sea Emperor's shocking sword. And the Boundless Sea Emperor's performance had just begun. After the Venerable Li sword, the sword seal changed, and the 200-meter-tall giant unleashed an incomparably gentle sword Tao. The sky was filled with sword chi, like clouds and mist. Venerable Moon Reflector almost vomited blood. Fuck! The Great Yin sword. It was extremely gentle, ethereal, and unpredictable sword will. The sword Tao that the Boundless Sea Emperor was currently using was another sword Tao of Shushan's 6 Meridian sword Tao, the Great Yin sword. From the sidelines, Ben Lazy and Venerable Star Constellation looked at each other. Even though they were on the same side as Lin Feng, they still felt bitter in their mouths. Could it be that anyone who fights with this Dharmakaya will instantly comprehend the mystique and spiritual arts? For a moment, everyone's gazes landed on Lin Feng, who was standing quietly in the void. They saw him smiling as he leisurely watched his 2 mystique clones fight with the 2 second-tier primordial spirit realm sword cultivators from the Shushan sword sect, who were in an earth-shattering battle. Chapter 484. The Boundless Ocean Emperor intimidated the crowd, and the Great Sun Emperor did not let him have the upper hand. A strong light burst forth from the Great Sun Emperor's body, and a bright light gathered in his palm, turning into a sun, rising up and shining brightly. In the next moment, this sun suddenly disappeared, like a heavenly dog swallowing the sun. Even the Great Sun Emperor's body formed from pure golden flames fell into darkness, like a black hole that swallowed up all light. In this darkness, the Great Sun Emperor's avatar gave off a terrifying aura that made one's heart palpitate. Its power was condensed, like a calamity. It was as if as long as he willed it, he could destroy the space that everyone was in with a wave of his hand. Great Sun God Fist, Sun Eclipse Change. Lin Feng's Great Sun God Fist was obtained after combining the power of the sun's true fire with the grand concept of the creation of heaven and earth, and it was extremely powerful. And this eclipse transformation's first transformation was to burn up the essence of sunlight and the true fire's divine light in an instant, so that one could instantly erupt with combat power that was far beyond ordinary. This extremely ferocious fist clashed with the Little Shang sword, and the result was that sword Venerable Little Shang was sent flying. The majestic sword light that was like the Milky Way shattered into thousands of streams of light, scattering in all directions. It was as if a treasured sword that could cut through metal like mud had clashed head-on with a huge hammer. No matter how sharp it was, it could not withstand such a violent collision. The great Sun Yen Emperor's avatar wavered on the spot, and the power of the sun eclipse change dissipated. The flames lit up once more, and there were some places that had been slashed by the Shaoshang sword, but these wounds did not weaken the great Sun Yen Emperor, but made him even more ferocious. The sword light dissipated, revealing a sword-wielding man with a strong aura. He was 100 feet tall, holding a huge sword, and had a stern face, his eyes like lightning. It was Sword Venerable Little Shang's Void Return avatar. At the last moment, Sword Venerable Little Shang displayed his strongest move, transforming his primordial spirit into a Void Return avatar, which was why he did not follow in Ning Lang's footsteps, and was almost killed by Lin Feng's Great Sun God Fist. Sword Venerable Guan Chong looked at this scene in shock. He has such powerful battle power just with his avatar. Could it be that back then in the Cloud Forest world, he was afraid of the complicated situation, so he wasn't willing to make a move? Or could it be that the one in Cloud Forest realm back then was simply just a clone of his? Taking a deep breath, Sword Venerable Guan Chong suppressed all his questions and said in a deep voice, "Don't worry about Sword Immortal anymore." Almost before he opened his mouth, Sword Lord Shaozi, who had been suppressing Old Sword Immortal in the distance, had already withdrawn. Like Sword Lord Shaoshang, he abandoned his original opponent and charged toward Lin Feng. In the blink of an eye, the junior Sword Venerable crossed the endless space and arrived in front of Lin Feng. He snorted and transformed into a swordsman who was 20 feet tall, wearing a tall hat and ancient clothes. The long sword in his hand turned into a cold gleam. The cold light flashed and instantly turned into a sky full of starlight. In an instant, it traversed thousands of space-time and aimed at Lin Feng. Learning from Sword Lord Shaoshang and Sword Lord Li Meng's lessons, Sword Lord Shaozi revealed his Void Return Dermic physique right from the start. On the other side, Sword Lord Guan Chong disregarded the fact that his vital qi had yet to recover and also revealed his Void Return Dermic physique. He transformed into the image of a burly man who was 70 feet tall and carried a huge sword. That huge sword was round and edgeless, looking like a huge iron bar. However, it possessed an aura that could suppress all nothingness and bear the weight of 1,000 caddies. In addition to Sword Lord Shaoshang and Sword Lord Li Meng, the four great Void Return Realm Sword Masters of Mount Shu Sword Sect attacked Lin Feng together. Lin Feng still had a calm expression on his face. He raised his hand and lightly tapped the space between his eyebrows. Two more powerful energy concepts rushed out from the Tai Chi runes on his forehead. When these two concepts landed in the void, they also instantly transformed into two huge human figures that were over 2,000 feet tall. Their facial features and appearance were exactly the same as Lin Feng, the Great Sun Emperor, and the Boundless Ocean Emperor. Shockingly, they were two of Lin Feng's divine ability dermic bodies again. For symbols heaven opening scripture wind divine time wind. For symbols heaven opening scripture earth heaven bearing seal. A formless, shadowless, and colorless storm condensed in the void, transforming into an almost transparent giant. This was the dermic body that Lin Feng had transformed from the divine time wind divine ability. Its name was Divine Time Wind Emperor, and it went up to meet Sword Lord Shaoshang. Sword Lord Shaoshang used his sword will and spiritual power to the extreme. As the sword light changed, it transformed into a myriad of stars. This was not a feint, nor was it an illusion. Every sword light that was like a cold star was real. Just one sword strike was enough to severely injure or even kill a primordial spirit transformation realm expert. Each ray of sword light represented a possibility in that instant. Facing Sword Lord Xiaoshang, Wind Emperor chanted, the vicissitudes of the world in an instant. A flash of light has passed for 1,000 years. Power surged around him, and a sharp astral wind instantly swept through the surrounding space, enveloping all of Sword Lord Xiaoshang's sword light. There was a strange tremor in the space, and all the sword light disappeared. All that was left was a short swordsman wearing a high crown and ancient robes. The long sword in his hand was flashing with a cold light. All the onlookers were stunned. This was because they had just witnessed this scene. It was the exact moment when Sword Lord Xiaoshang was about to unleash his return to void stage Dharma body. In the next instant, the tip of the long sword in his hand transformed into a cold light, and it was about to transform into thousands of sword lights that entered different planes of time to assassinate Lin Feng. But now, this scene was replaying before everyone's eyes. Sword Lord's solar luminary and the others naturally didn't think that they were seeing things or that they were hallucinating. There was only one reason for this, and that was that Wind Emperor Xiaoshang's power had forcibly reversed the flow of time in the space where Sword Lord Xiaoshang had just been. Although it was only for a short instant, it was already astonishing enough. Sword Lord Xiaoshang was a sword cultivator of the Return to Void stage, and he had also cultivated in a divine ability like Sword Lord Xiaoshang. He had also comprehended some of the mysteries of time. His consciousness was extremely clear, and he immediately understood what had happened. However, Wind Emperor Xiaoshang had already taken advantage of this opportunity to close in on Sword Lord Xiaoshang before Sword Lord Xiaoshang could unleash its power. Powerful gales of wind swept violently towards Sword Lord Xiaoshang's return to void stage Dharma body, forcing Sword Lord Xiaoshang into a sorry state. Meanwhile, on the other side, streaks of earthy yellow light converged to form a mighty giant. The giant made a seal with both hands before crushing down towards Sword Lord Guanchong. A powerful power-intent realm emanated from the giant's body. It wasn't sharp or ferocious, but it was extremely heavy, powerful, and indestructible. It was like the earth that bore the weight of the heavens and nurtured all things. Any power that fell upon the earth would be able to withstand it. At the same time, the earth was also extremely heavy, capable of suppressing all things and preventing them from wreaking havoc. The return to void stage Dharma body manifested by Sword Lord Guanchong advanced toward Lin Feng step by step with the ancient and solemn sword intent of Sword Lord Guanchong. However, he didn't expect to encounter Lin Feng's Dharma body, Emperor of Heaven and Earth, which was condensed from the heaven-bearing seal divine ability. It was a battle of clumsiness against clumsiness, a battle of great ingenuity against great ingenuity. Even though Sword Lord Guanchong had unleashed his own sword realm, he was still unable to withstand the increasingly heavy pressure. In the Mount Shu Sword Sect's camp, a middle-aged man with a calm and composed aura unsheathed his sword to assist Sword Lord Guanchong. The sword projection he unleashed was pure gold. It wasn't ostentatious or sharp. Instead, it was calm and heavy, like a mountain that could hold up the seas and the heavens. However, in the face of this sword, many people felt as if they were a head shorter. They felt guilty and could only kneel down obediently, repent their sins, and peacefully await execution. The Shaoyang sword was the most neutral and peaceful sword among the 6 lineages of Mount Shu. It was the most difficult to cultivate, but after mastering it, it would be flawless and without any flaws. It was widely recognized as the strongest of the 6 lineages. Sword Lord Xiaoyang was guarding his hometown in Mount Shu and didn't come to Tianjia Peak. However, there was someone from the Shaoyang sword sect who came with Sword Lord Guanchong and the others. It was the #1 expert of the Shaoyang sword sect, second only to the sword master, Sword Lord Qingtian. Although he was only at the first tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm, his aura was as imposing as a mountain. Even the second tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm, Sword Lord Flying Snow, and Sword Lord Streamlight, didn't dare to underestimate him. Sword Lord Qing Tian wanted to use the Shaoyang sword to assist Sword Lord Guan Chong to break through Lin Feng's Emperor of Heaven's seal. However, Lin Feng didn't take it to heart at all. The 200 zhang tall Emperor of Heaven and Earth formed a seal with both hands and continued to press down, directly suppressing Sword Lord Qing Tian. The neutral and calm golden sword light couldn't hold on under the immense power of the divine land and kept trembling. Sword Lord Shaoshang and Sword Lord Shaozi joined in the siege against Lin Feng. Sword Lord Streamlight and Sword Lord Old Immortal were able to extricate themselves and return to the side of Sword Lord Solar Luminary and the others. Everyone looked at everything that was happening in front of them in shock. They saw Lin Feng with his hands behind his back. He had a calm expression on his face and there was even a relaxed smile on his lips. As for the 4 divine ability avatars that he manifested, they each displayed their unique abilities. Not only did they fight against Sword Lord Shaoshang, Sword Lord Shaozi, Sword Lord Guan Chong, and Sword Lord Li Xiong, they even brought Sword Lord Moonreflector and Sword Lord Qing Tian along with them. Fighting 1 against 6, he suppressed 6 primordial spirit transformation realm sword cultivators of Mount Shu and gained the upper hand. Even until now, Lin Feng hadn't revealed his primordial spirit incarnation. Sword Lord Flying Snow's aura was waning. Until now, he had yet to completely regain his breath. However, he stared at the battle unblinkingly. Divine ability secret arts that allow one to condense an avatar are extremely rare and precious. He actually grasped 4 of them at once. And he has cultivated all of them to the supreme realm of grand perfection, condensing 4 great avatars at once. Sword Lord Old Immortal had a similarly solemn expression. Remarkable ability, remarkable ability. 1 divine ability avatar is able to suppress the Sword Master Grandmaster, a cultivator at the 2nd level of primordial spirit transformation realm who wields the swords of Mount Shu lineage. Divine ability avatars will weaken the strength of the primordial spirit incarnation. Condensing too many divine ability avatars will even place a huge burden on the primordial spirit. Star Constellation Sword Lord muttered, but looking at the appearance of this master of Xian Men, he seems to be extremely relaxed. Clearly, splitting these 4 avatars is still a piece of cake for him. It might not even affect the combat power of his primordial spirit incarnation. Sword Lord Solar Luminary let out a long sigh. If that's the case, how strong is his combat power? Such magic power can be said to be boundless. It was common to describe the strength of martial cultivators. They were said to have remarkable abilities and boundless magic power. But what kind of person could be said to have remarkable abilities and boundless magic power? At this moment, everyone present, including many Shushan sword cultivators, looked towards Lin Feng, a thought appearing in their minds. This was remarkable abilities and boundless magic power. Sword Lord Little Shang, who was once again forced back by the Great Sun Emperor, had an extremely solemn expression. He roared, "I was originally prepared for this. Now, it's time to strike. Formation." Chapter 485. Get into formation. Following Honorable Swordsman Xiao Shang's shout, Honorable Swordsman Li Meng, Honorable Swordsman Xiao Zhe and Honorable Swordsman Guan Chong all retreated. Both Sword Venerable Reaching Sky and Sword Venerable Moonshine pinched their swords with solemn expressions and shouted in unison, "Go!" A sword cry rang out as 2 majestic sword lights soared into the sky. One was calm and steady while the other was unpredictable. They actually forcefully blocked the attacks of the Boundless Ocean Emperor and the Earth Emperor. Such strength was not something a First Firmament Essence Soul Sword cultivator should have. Everyone looked at each other. An old sword immortal said in a deep voice, "It's the Shaoyang sword and the Tai Yin sword." At that moment, Sword Venerable Qing Tian and Sword Venerable Moonshine revealed their essence spirit incarnations and placed their essence spirits completely on the 2 swords. They were 2 magical treasures, flying swords. They were majestic and powerful, as if endless sword intent was spreading out in all directions. They were not something that ordinary magical treasures could match. Everyone in the world knew that Shu Mountain had the immortal heaven sword, the most powerful killing treasure in the divine land. It was extremely powerful and could control the fate of Shu Mountain. It had been more than 4,000 years since the last war between the two worlds. Below the immortal heaven sword, Shu Mountain also had the 6 meridian immortal swords, which were controlled by the sword masters and grandmasters of the 6 meridian swords. They were also powerful magical treasures that were world famous. They had been refined by the descendants of the 6 meridian swords for tens of thousands of years and were constantly strengthened. Furthermore, they were worshipped by countless disciples of Shu Mountain. Any one of them had the power to split the sky and earth. And now, 2 of the 6 meridian celestial swords had appeared before their eyes. The Shaoyang sword was the most precious treasure of Shu Mountain's Shaoyang sword lineage. The sword was 10 feet long and the blade was 1 foot wide. The sword's body was simple and dignified, and it was oval like a pillar. There were no edges on either side of the sword, only a sharp tip. It symbolized a dignified and righteous aura, not using killing power to subdue others. It was perfect and flawless, and the benevolent were invincible. The Taiyin sword was the inherited treasure of Mount Shu's Taiyin sword branch. Only the hilt could be seen with the naked eye, and the blade could not be seen. Above the hilt floated layers of clouds and mist, making it hard to grasp. Amidst the clouds and mist, a bright sword light could be vaguely seen. It was like moonlight, waxing and waning, ever-changing. The sword master of Mount Shu's 6 meridian swords, venerated lunar swordsman, had already fallen. Venerated Shaoyang swordsman stayed in Mount Shu and did not come out. There were only 4 6 meridian sword masters present. However, Sword Venerable Soaring Sky and Sword Venerable Moonshine brought the Shaoyang sword and the Moon Reflection sword with them. They did not use them before because it was too much of a burden for them to wield the 2 swords with their cultivation. But now, it did not matter. The 2 of them had brought out their respective treasures from the sword lineage in order to cooperate with Honorable Swordsman Little Shang and the other 3 to set up the Mount Shu Sword Sect's famous 6 Meridians Heavenly Immortal Sword Formation. Honorable Swordsman Xiao Sheng, Honorable Swordsman Xiao Zhe, Honorable Swordsman Li, Honorable Swordsman Guan Chong, Honorable Swordsman Qing Tian who controlled the Shaoyang sword, and Honorable Swordsman Ing Yu who controlled the Tai Yin sword. The 6 of them formed a hexagon and stood at each corner, forming a formation. Instantly, a murderous aura filled the air, causing the space to tremble. 6 pillars of light shot into the sky with Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others at the center. Each pillar of light contained an extreme sword Dao. The pillar of light with Honorable Swordsman Little Shang at the center was the thickest. Cold light flashed, shocking one's soul. The sword intent was the most ferocious and violent, as though it could destroy everything in the world. And in the pillar of light conjured by Honorable Swordsman Little Shang, countless spatial fragments resonated with each other. They were crystal clear, and the power of time was infused into them. Countless lights and shadows flashed. Honorable Swordsman Guan Chong stood silently in the void. The pillar of light around him was pure black, like a hard rock or iron. It was extremely dignified, like a heavenly pillar that supported the heavens. The pillar of light around Honorable Swordsman fiercely was the weakest. It was not even comparable to the first-tier Essence Soul Realm Sword Venerable Soaring Sky and Sword Venerable Moonshine. However, this seemingly weak pillar of light contained the fiercest murderous aura. It was the strongest of the 6 swords. Sword Venerable Soaring Sky had completely placed his primordial spirit on the Shaoyang sword. The Shaoyang sword floated calmly in the air with its tip pointed upwards. The majestic and peaceful sword light was filled with the majestic aura of the Tao of Kings. It did not allow anyone to offend it. Sword Venerable Moonshine was the same as Sword Venerable Soaring Sky. He had also placed his primordial spirit on the Taiyin sword. His was the most unique among the 6 swords. The other 5 swords were sword light, but his was still a cloud-like sword Qi. It floated up into the sky like a cloud pillar. The 6 swords of Shushan gathered together, pushing their sword intent and spiritual power to the extreme. The terrifying sword intent combined and pierced through the void for thousands of miles. Even space was torn apart, and the cracks were dotted with stars, revealing the distant starry sea of the universe. What was even more terrifying was that the sword intent of the 6 pulse swords of Shushan was constantly fusing with each other, growing and stimulating each other. Just the fusion of the two swords had already increased their power to a terrifying level. Now that the 6 swords were resonating together, the sword intent and spiritual power were constantly rising at a geometrical speed. The 6 pulse heavenly immortal sword formation of Shushan was a famous killing formation in the divine land. In the history of the human cultivation world, every time this formation was used, a primordial spirit expert would definitely fall to it. It had never failed. Old Sword Immortal looked at this shocking scene and sighed. The 6 pulse heavenly immortal sword formation of Shushan is really terrifying. The Heavenly Sword sect was second in the 9 Heavenly Sword League. They had been constantly developing and strengthening their strength, hoping to one day challenge the position of Shushan and ascend to the throne of the #1 holy land of swordsmanship. However, this was destined to be a distant dream for a very long time. Sword Venerable Sunlight said in a deep voice, "They specially brought the Shaoyang sword and the Taiyin sword here to set up this sword formation. What will the master of the Taoist sect do?" The others all looked at Lin Feng, only to see Lin Feng watching with interest as the 6 pulse heavenly immortal sword formation of Shushan took shape. He's actually not stopping the other party from setting up the formation. Isn't that a little too arrogant? Since Lin Feng did not move, Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others naturally would not stand on ceremony. The spiritual power of the 6 surged together, and the 6 ultimate sword intents fused into one, forming a white chaotic whole. The white chaotic whole swirled with air currents, and an extremely terrifying power was being born from within. Ben Lazy smiled sadly. It's here, it's here. Heavenly Immortal Sword Chi. It's finally here. This is the true terror of the 6 pulse heavenly immortal sword formation. Although the 6 pulse swords of Shushan each walked an extreme path, they actually came from the same source. They were the supreme swords of Shushan, the heavenly immortal sword Chi. The 6 pulse heavenly immortal sword formation's infamy had spread throughout the great heaven primordial world because when the formation was activated to its extreme, the 6 swords would become one, and the heavenly immortal sword Chi could be unleashed. Finally, an extremely fine sword Chi shot out from the white chaotic hole, heading straight for Lin Feng. The sword Chi looked extremely weak, like a gentle breeze, but it was extremely terrifying. It contained a grand power that could pierce through the heavens and earth, and could evolve into thousands of swords. It was the ultimate sublimation of thousands of swords into one, and it was also the starting point and source of all swords in the world. It was both the starting point and the final destination. The moment this sword Chi appeared, everyone present grunted. Be it the second-tier primordial spirit realm cultivators Old Sword Immortal, Sword Venerable Flying Snow, Celerita's Swordsman, or the first-tier primordial spirit realm cultivators Sword Venerable Sun, Sword Venerable Constellation, or Ben Lazy, all of them trembled violently. It was as if the depths of their souls had been shaken, and they had a feeling of wanting to submit. That was the sword intent that they had attained Tao stirring. It was like the most primal instinct, like a rabbit seeing a lion, or a mantis seeing an oriole. In the mortal world, between rulers and subjects, the ruler wanted the subject to die, and the subject had no choice but to die. And the source of all this was that seemingly weak, but in fact extremely terrifying sword Chi. Heavenly Immortal Sword Chi. Once the heavenly immortal sword appeared, all swords would submit. This sword was undoubtedly the emperor of swords in the great heaven primordial world. Once it appeared, all swords would return to their roots and fight to worship it. The Yuanying sword cultivator from the Canghai sword sect spat out a mouthful of blood. Yuanying was almost shaken out of his body. Old Sword Immortal and the other great sword cultivators at the primordial spirit realm had extremely ugly expressions. They could still resist the pressure from the heavenly immortal sword Chi, but they also felt extremely uncomfortable. Other than the discomfort of their primordial spirit dermic powers, they felt even more humiliated on a spiritual level. Why did most Sword Dao sects more or less have the intention to resist Shu Mountain? Because to them, if they did not resist, they could only gradually become vassals of Shu Mountain. To these experts who had attained the primordial spirit realm, when faced with such an enemy, their first reaction would never be to submit. They would only think of ways to unite and destroy this opponent. But every time they truly faced the heavenly immortal sword Qi, they would all feel a deep sense of despair. And now, this terrifying heavenly immortal sword Qi was cleaving down on Lin Feng's head. The concept of power contained in the sword Qi was extremely pure and simple. It wanted to pierce through all obstacles in front of it. All obstructions were futile. Sword Venerable Little Shang, Sword Venerable Shaozi, Sword Venerable Guan Chong, Sword Venerable Li Xiong, Sword Venerable Towering Sky, and Sword Venerable Moon Reflection. The 6 great sword cultivators shouted in unison, all swords in the world come out of Shu Mountain. Master of the Mystic Gate, take our heavenly immortal sword Qi. Back in the cloudy forest realm, Lin Feng did not take the heavenly immortal sword Qi head-on when facing the Shu Mountain sword sect leader Xan Longsheng's heavenly immortal sword Qi. Facing this heaven primordial first sword again, Lin Feng's lips suddenly curled into a smile. If it was Xan Longsheng, it might be possible. You guys can't do it. Lin Feng's main body finally moved. With a light clap of his palms, the sky-bearing Emperor of Earth, the Boundless Ocean Emperor, the Great Sun Emperor, and the Time-Light Emperor of Wind, the 4 huge avatars of over 600 zhang tall shattered at the same time. Endless, surging earth, water, fire, and wind churned the entire void into a chaotic mess. But this time, Lin Feng did not allow the 4 images to go berserk. Instead, he used his own dermic powers to stabilize the 4 images. The earth, water, fire, and wind returned to their original positions and became balanced again. In the void turbulence, something that looked like a bubble appeared. Lin Feng stretched out his finger and tapped the bubble lightly. The bubble instantly burst, and 2 streams of air, one clear and one turbid, rushed out. An incomparably powerful force flowed out from it. That was the origin of the world, the beginning of a place's creation. It was a powerful force that could split the heavens and earth apart. Lin Feng smiled faintly. Primordial heaven-splitting technique. The majestic force that split the heavens and earth apart met the heavenly immortal sword Qi of Shu Mountain's 6 meridian heavenly immortal sword formation. Chapter 486. With a flick of Lin Feng's finger, the bubble burst. 2 streams of air, one clear and one turbid, rushed out, and a powerful intent of splitting the heavens and earth manifested. The turbid air sank, settling and condensing, solidifying into a physical form. It transformed into the earth, then into mountains and rivers. The clear air rose, vast and mysterious. It transformed into the sky, then into the stars, the sun, and the moon. The immense power that rearranged the earth, water, fire, and wind, and separated the heavens and earth, directly suppressed the heavenly immortal sword Qi that Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others had unleashed through the 6 meridian immortal heaven sword formation. The Tai Chi diagram on Lin Feng's forehead spun continuously, and his spiritual power surged, transforming into an almost unstoppable attack. It was like the tide of time, crushing and drowning all opponents who dared to try and stop a chariot. At this moment, even the mysterious heavenly immortal sword Qi had met an opponent that it could not penetrate. It was as if it was being suppressed by a world, and it was being pushed back. Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others were furious, but there was nothing they could do. The unstoppable power of the heavenly immortal sword Qi was all crushing down on the 6 of them. The majestic intent of splitting the heavens and earth instantly made them suffer unspeakably. Sword Venerable Little Shang, Sword Venerable Shaozi, and Sword Venerable Li Xiong were fine, but Sword Venerable Guan Chong, who had yet to recover, and Sword Venerable Sky Raising Sword and Sword Venerable Moon Reflecting Sword were in big trouble. The primordial spirits of Sword Venerable Sky Raising Sword and Sword Venerable Moon Reflecting Sword were directly separated from the Shaoyang Sword and Taiyin Sword. Their primordial spirits were extremely weak, and they were completely relying on the two immortal swords to continue supporting the sword formation. Sword Venerable Guan Chong had no choice but to manifest his Void Return Dharma body to support the sword formation. Void Return Dharma bodies were extremely precious. Although they were powerful, once they were damaged, it would cause great harm to the primordial spirit cultivator, and it was extremely difficult to repair. But Sword Venerable Guan Chong could not care so much at this moment, because the pressure on them from Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening technique was increasing. The power of the world created by the clear and the other turbid had already pressed down on the white hole above the 6 meridian immortal heaven sword formation. The other primordial spirit experts of the Shushan sword sect who had come along were watching the terrifying battle from afar. They were all shaken. They had not expected the 6 meridian immortal heavenly sword formation to be suppressed by Lin Feng. In the entire Mount Shu sword sect, other than the Great Mountain Guarding Formation and the Great Immortal Manifestation Sword Formation, the 6 Meridian Heavenly Immortal Sword Formation was the strongest killing formation. In the entire Heaven Primal world, it was also one of the few fearsome formations, but now it was about to be defeated. Swordsman Reaching Sky and Swordsman Mirror Moon were all seriously injured. Swordsman Guan Chong and the other 3 could only hold on bitterly. The dignified Shushan sword sect, with so many experts, was beaten to this point by one person alone. Sword Venerable Broken Mountain Ning Lang, who had narrowly escaped death and was now severely injured and weak, looked at Lin Feng in a daze. I actually provoked such a person time and time again. When Old Immortal Sword, Sword Reverend Flying Snow, Sword Reverend Sunlight, and the others saw this, they could not help but feel a chill down their spines. Mount Shu had come prepared this time. With a large army, it was almost as if they wanted to crush all the participants of this gathering with the strength of a single sect. But now, it was Lin Feng who had crushed all the Mount Shu cultivators present with his strength alone. One-on-one, ganging up on him, and finally forming a large formation to gang up on him. But it was all in vain. Against Lin Feng, who could take on a large formation with his bare hands, Mount Shu could only swallow the bitter pill of defeat. Seeing Lin Feng single-handedly suppress the 6 Meridian Heavenly Immortal Sword formation formed by the 6 experts of Mount Shu, Old Immortal Sword and the others were in awe. 3rd Tier Primordial Spirit Transformation Realm. Other than that, there is no other possibility. Ben Lazy turned to look at Old Immortal Sword. The Master of the Mystic Gate is definitely an expert no weaker than the Great Voids Yen Nan Lai and Mount Shu's Xian Longsheng. Slowly, Old Immortal Sword nodded. Previously, when the Heavenly Sword Sect contacted the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, they had made many guesses about Lin Feng's cultivation. Initially, they thought that they had overestimated Lin Feng. Who knew that in the end, they had still underestimated him? Sword Reverend Flying Snow and Sword Reverend Sunlight exchanged glances. Everything that has happened today must be reported to His Majesty, the Emperor of Qin. Everything that has happened in the past about Xianmen Tianzong must be re-evaluated. That's right. The comparison of strength between Xianmen Tianzong and Mount Shu Sword Sect must be adjusted. Not to mention his mountain sect and the many monstrous disciples under him, just the existence of the Master of the Mystic Gate alone is enough to make Xianmen Tianzong a top force that can fight against Mount Shu. Compared to the others who were overthinking things, Venerable Streamlight only felt his mind go blank. He was an extremely proud person. Because of the conflict between Xiao Yan and Murong Yanran, the Streamlight Sword Sect had lost a lot of face. Therefore, he had always hoped to have a battle with Lin Feng. Originally, he thought that he had kept a trump card. After breaking through to the 2nd tier of the Primordial Spirit Transformation Realm and reaching the Void Return Realm, he would be able to redeem himself. But now, it seemed like all of this was a joke. Such a huge difference made even Venerable Streamlight dazed for a moment. After a while, he came to his senses, laughed bitterly, and shook his head repeatedly. The thoughts of the people around him were undulating as their imaginations ran wild. Meanwhile, the 6 great sword cultivators of Mount Shu within the 6 Meridian Immortal Heaven Sword Formation were almost at the brink of life and death. After Venerable Guan Chong manifested his void return realm dermic body, his entire body was trembling. At this moment, under the immense pressure, his void return realm dermic body was directly crushed. For a second-tier primordial spirit transformation realm cultivator, the void return realm dermic body was the foundation of achieving Tao. And now, Venerable Guan Chang's void return realm dermic body was directly crushed under the pressure of Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening technique. Thousands of years of hard work had been destroyed in an instant. With the void return realm dermic body shattered, the cultivation level of a second-tier primordial spirit transformation realm cultivator would directly fall back to the first-tier primordial spirit transformation realm. Of the 6 Meridian Immortal Heaven Sword Formation, Guan Chang's Sword Formation Master, Venerable Guan Chong, had been instantly beaten back to the primordial spirit transformation realm by Lin Feng. And this was just the beginning. Very soon, Venerable Xiao Shang and the others were also forced to reveal their void return realm dermic bodies. The 6 Meridian Immortal Heaven Sword Formation was in imminent danger. At this moment, a crack suddenly appeared in the void. A huge giant with white light flashing all over his body stepped out from within. The giant had the appearance of a middle-aged man. His face was fair and clean, and his facial features were ordinary. However, his vast sword will made everyone look at him. This was a powerful concept that was not inferior to Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening technique. It was as if the heavens and earth had yet to be created, born from the primordial chaos. This sword would cleave the primordial chaos apart and create a new world. This was the concept possessed by the true immortal heaven sword Qi. Venerable Xiao Shang and the others had not truly cultivated the immortal heaven sword Qi and had only barely activated it through the combined power of the 6 meridians. At this moment, the white giant's energy waves were not as powerful as the 6 Meridian Immortal Heaven Sword Formation, but it had truly grasped the essence of the Immortal Heaven Sword Qi. Venerable Sun Luminary took a deep breath. It's Xian Longxing's thaumaturgy body, the Immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign. The white giant's facial features and appearance were none other than the current sect master of the Shu Mountain Sword Sect, a third-tier primordial spirit transformation cultivator, Xian Longxing. Just like how Lin Feng had used his great sun god fist and other thaumaturgy bodies to form the grand sun flame monarch, the one that had arrived was also one of Xian Longxing's thaumaturgy bodies. It was the Immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign formed from Immortal Heaven Sword Qi. The Immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign didn't say anything. His figure flashed and directly entered the white hole created by the 6 Meridian Immortal Heaven Sword Formation. The power of the white hole suddenly surged. A majestic immortal heaven sword sovereign shot out and resisted the power of Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening art. It was no longer a weak sword energy like a gentle breeze, but a majestic stream of stars. At this moment, the immortal heaven sword sovereign revealed its ferocious and domineering nature. The white hole created by the sword formation was unable to exert its full power. But now, with the immortal heaven sword sovereign leading it, it immediately became ferocious and murderous. It met attack with attack and blocked Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening art. Old Sword Immortal and the others became nervous. Even though it was only a thaumaturgy body and not his real body, Xian Longxing still exerted great pressure on them. The sect master of Shu Mountain, a third-tier primordial spirit transformation cultivator, the #1 sword Dao in the heaven primordial spirit transformation realm. Lin Feng looked at this scene, but he did not panic. Instead he smiled slightly. Shushan Sword Dao lives up to its name. It's just a pity, all the swords in the world come from Shu Mountain, but my sword is beyond the heavens. Lin Feng silently raised his right hand. His index and middle fingers formed a sword and pointed at the sky. A terrifying sword intent capable of destroying the world emerged. If there was life in the void, this sword would exterminate it. If there was life in the stars, this sword would exterminate it. If there was life in the earth, this sword would exterminate it. It wasn't targeted at a single living entity, but rather the entire grand Tao of heaven and earth, the world of creation, to be annihilated. It was different from Shu Mountain's sword Dao or any other killing sword in this world. It was a sword that could punish the heavens, a sword that could destroy the world. In Lin Feng's Sea of Knowledge, the heavenly virtue scripture visualized a good fortune bell. Its form rapidly changed, going through the life creation gate, the river of time, and the book of destruction. After the book of destruction, it reached its end and turned into nothingness. At this time, there was no need for the life creation gate, no need for the river of time, and no need for the book of destruction. All that was needed was destruction, extermination. To kill everything, to destroy everything into nothingness. The most terrifying power to destroy everything, to turn everything into nothingness, to cease to exist, to not leave a single trace. At the fingertips of Lin Feng's right hand, two streams of mana, one black and one white, continuously revolved, transforming into a yin and yang yin tai chi pattern. At the center of the tai chi pattern, a gray sword tip slowly rose up from within, bringing with it a power that made the world tremble. This is the sword intent that Lin Feng comprehended from that peerless ominous sword. After fusing it with his own cultivation level and understanding of the Tao, this is a form of sword Tao that Lin Feng has mastered and mastered. Today is the first time it has appeared in the heaven primal world. What it challenges is the original number 1 sword Tao ability of the heaven primal world. This sword of mine is called the heaven punishing sword Qi. Please enlighten me, fellow Taoist Xen Longsheng. Lin Feng's tone was calm. His fingers moved, and a gray sword Qi shot towards the white hole formed by the 6 meridians Immortal Heaven Sword formation. Your name is Immortal Heaven, my name is Heaven Punishing Sword. The gray sword Qi was extremely terrifying. Everywhere it passed, space was reduced to nothingness, no longer existing. The white hole let out an earth-shattering howl, and a violent Immortal Heaven Sword Qi shot out from it. Like an enraged king, it did not retreat, and faced the challenge of the heaven punishing sword Qi head-on. Chapter 487. One gray and one white sword energy collided. The void violently twisted as if a hole had been created and the 2 sword energies poured into it. The hole exploded and countless sword energies flew in all directions, sweeping through all obstacles in their path. The void was connected to the distant universe, and countless small stars were destroyed and reduced to dust by the shockwaves of the immortal heavenly sword Qi and heaven punishing sword Qi. Even large and medium-sized stars were affected and shook violently. Be it Venerable Sword Soaring Snow, Venerable Sword Luminary, or the other Shushan sword cultivators, all of them retreated rapidly. At the same time, they activated their sword will and spiritual power to protect themselves from being caught in the crossfire. Just the shockwaves from the collision are already so powerful. Immortal swords slowly nodded, heavenly immortal sword energies, we finally have a worthy opponent. Ben Lazy grunted, from now on, Shu Mountain can no longer claim to be number 1 in the world in the way of the sword. As he spoke, the space at the center of the collision continued to distort and shatter. The terrifying gray sword energy once again poked its head out from the hole. It was Lin Feng's heaven punishing sword energies. After resisting the heavenly immortal sword energies, the heaven punishing sword energies still had some power left. It turned into a terrifying sword energy that continued forward. Under the horrified gazes of the Shushan crowd, the gray sword Qi slashed at the white hole and directly pierced through it. As if the world was collapsing, the white hole collapsed. Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others that formed the 6 meridian immortal sword formation all cried out in pain. Both the return to void dharma physiques and primordial spirit avatars were cracking inch by inch. Light energy shot out continuously as if their flesh was spewing out blood. All 6 primordial spirit cultivators were gravely injured. The 6 meridian immortal sword formation that dominated the heaven's origin for countless years and caused countless experts to be alarmed was broken. The white hole shattered and the terrifying gray sword energy flashed in the air. It didn't dissipate and continued to slash down. With a flash of light, Sect Master Xan Longsheng's avatar, the immortal heaven sword sovereign, appeared in the air again. However, at this moment, the immortal heaven sword sovereign was also weakened and on the verge of destruction. The immortal Heaven Sword Monarch's body turned into a vast expanse of white sword energy that enveloped Sword Venerable Little Shang's group of 6 as well as the other Shu Mountain cultivators. A supreme sword intent broke through the void, wanting to send everyone back to Shu Mountain. However, the heaven-punishing sword energy was too terrifying. It directly cut through the immortal Heaven Sword Monarch's body and cut him in half. This sword completely destroyed Xian Longsheng's divine ability Dharma body. The number 1 holy land of swordsmanship in the world, Mount Shu Sword Sect, the dignified sect leader had his Dharmakaya destroyed. It was truly a great humiliation. Apart from the war between the two worlds, the number of times such a situation had happened since ancient times could be counted on one hand. What angered them even more was that the immortal Heaven Sword Monarch's avatar was destroyed and the spatial passage was about to close. All of them would be trapped here. At this moment, the void passageway that was about to close, on the other side of the passageway, a sword light suddenly appeared, opening up the passageway once again. Someone used powerful magic power to sweep up Sword Venerable, Little Shang, and the others, preparing to take them away. Lin Feng smiled faintly. Xian Longsheng, I won't make things difficult for you if you take them away, not because they don't have a path of death, but rather because killing them would damage the overall strength of the human cultivation path, giving the demon race a free advantage. In the future, if we fight against the demon race, we will still need their help, so I will be lenient today. However, your Shu Mountain is too overbearing, wanting to leave without paying any price. How could it be so simple? Lin Feng's right hand slashed in the air, heavenly realm barrier. Suddenly, the powerful Dharma power prohibition isolated the void. The sword light that Xian Longsheng used to guide the people of Shu Mountain trembled violently and burst into countless streams of light. Within that stream of light, there were 2 rays of light that were the most dazzling. Lin Feng changed the All-Celestial Realm Barrier spell into the All-Celestial Capture. Layers of spatial power transformed into a huge palm, forcefully capturing those 2 rays of light. After the light dissipated, the 2 things that were caught by the giant palm were 2 swords. One of them was 1 meter long and 1 foot wide. Its body was simple and dignified with an oval-shaped body like a pillar. There were no edges on either side, only a sharp tip. As for the other sword, only the hilt could be seen with the naked eye. Layers of mist floated above the hilt, making it difficult to grasp. Inside, one could vaguely see bright sword rays flashing in an ever-changing manner. These were the Young Yang sword and Extreme Yin sword of Shu Mountain's 6 meridians immortal swords. These 2 swords were top-flying treasures, so how could they be captured by Lin Feng? They violently struggled, but Lin Feng calmly used the Heavenly Grand Capture to capture them. Then, he used his Heavenly Minor World technique to create a violet world and threw the 2 swords inside. Next, the Heaven Bearer Seal's magical art activated and suppressed the 2 swords from 3 different directions. In the void, Xian Longsheng's sword energy took Sword Venerable Little Shang's group away. Waves of sword energy condensed into a figure in the air, another immortal Heaven Sword Monarch. It had the same facial features as Xian Longsheng. At this moment, it was expressionlessly looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng's expression was indifferent as he calmly stared back at the immortal Heaven Sword Monarch. Sword Venerable Sun's group was far away and silently watched the 2 big shots. The atmosphere was so tense that it felt like it was about to freeze. What they had seen and heard today had a great impact on them. They were supposed to be facing Shu Mountain and were about to suffer a crushing defeat and lose face. Even Sword Venerable Flying Snow almost lost his life. But who knew that in the end, it would become a battle between Lin Feng and the Shushan Sword Sect? The result of the battle was even more shocking. With Lin Feng's strength alone, he turned the tide and defeated the people of Shushan. Sword Venerable Little Shang, Sword Venerable Guan Chong, Sword Venerable Shaozi, Sword Venerable Li Meng, Sword Venerable Moonshine, Sword Venerable Towering Sky, and Sword Venerable Swordsman Ning Lang of Broken Mountain. The 7 experts were all seriously injured. Among them, Sword Venerable Guan Chong had his return to void physique destroyed and his cultivation level dropped. The Shaoyang sword and the Taiyin sword, two of the 6 meridian immortal swords of Shushan, the legacy treasures of the Shaoyang and Taiyin sword lineages of the 6 meridian swords of Shushan, were also seized by Lin Feng. This was practically equivalent to breaking the foundation of the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords. How many years had it been since the Shu Mountain sword sect suffered such a great loss? If not for sect master Xi and Longxing's timely arrival, the dozen or so Shushan sword cultivators at the primordial soul realm would have perished here. Among them were Sword Venerable Shaoshang and 4 other sword masters at the 2nd tier of the primordial soul realm. Even though the Mount Shu sword sect was a powerful sect, it could not afford such a loss. In today's battle, Lin Feng almost broke the backbone of the entire Shu Mountain. Xi and Longxing's immortal heaven sword Lord Avatar stared at Lin Feng expressionlessly and said slowly, "There is no need to say more. Lin Feng, I will leave the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords with you for now. Shu Mountain will soon take them back." Lin Feng chuckled and said calmly, "Why go through so much trouble? When I have time in the future, I will personally go to Shu Mountain and see the scenery of Western Shu. At that time, I will have to trouble fellow Daoist Xi and Longxing to not reject me." Lin Feng's words naturally did not mean that he would voluntarily return the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords to their rightful owners and apologize. Old Sword Immortal and the others gasped in unison. This Daoist master of the Daoist gate meant that not only would he hand over the other party's immortal swords, he would also take the initiative to attack the other party's mountain. Didn't he know that there was one of the strongest spirit formations in the human world of the Divine Land, the Great Immortal Heaven Sword Formation? Didn't he know that there was the mountain treasure of Shu Mountain, the top-killing treasure of the Divine Land, the Supreme Immortal Heaven Sword? Didn't he know that other than Xi and Longxing, there was more than one Grand Supreme Elder of Shu Mountain at the 3rd tier of Primordial Spirit Realm who had always been in seclusion? Before this, the Daoist Gate Master seemed to have only relied on his own magic power and abilities to fight against Shu Mountain, Star Constellation Sword Venerable said slowly. He didn't use any magic treasures, not even his primordial spirit avatar. Sun Glory Sword Venerable and the others looked at each other. He still has that terrifying Jade Capital Mountain. At this point, they suddenly felt that Lin Feng's domineering presence at Shu Mountain was not that hard to imagine. However, the primordial spirit sword Venerable felt a bit bitter in their mouths. So the Daoist Gate Master is actually this powerful? Xi and Longxing's immortal heaven sword Venerable stared at Lin Feng and slightly nodded. "I'm afraid I will be the first to go to Kunlun to find you. At that time, don't try to avoid me." With that, the immortal heaven sword Venerable disappeared into the void. With the disappearance of the immortal heaven sword Venerable's gigantic body, the battle finally came to an end. Old Sword Immortal and the rest felt a little more relaxed. The 4 sword masters of the Shushan sword sect, and even the sect leader Xi and Longxing, who had appeared at the end, had given them too much pressure. But while they were relaxed, they were also a little disappointed. It's a pity that Xi and Longxing himself seems to be busy and could only come here with his sword will avatar. Exalted Sword Luminary thought, otherwise, we would be fortunate enough to witness a true pinnacle of sword arts. Not only him, but everyone else also had the same thought. However, they quickly calmed down and went up to greet Lin Feng. Although they didn't say it out loud, they all expressed their gratitude. It was the same for Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow and Venerable Sun Luminary. Especially Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow. If not for Lin Feng appearing in time, with Venerable Swordsman Li's ferocious nature, he would have definitely chased after Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow until he died. However, the two of them didn't feel good. This gathering was clearly led by the Qin dynasty, but it ended anticlimactic. They were almost humiliated by the Shu Mountain Sword Sect's army. In the end, they managed to regain their face, but it was Lin Feng who acted as a guest. This made the two of them feel ashamed. "No matter what, I have to report everything that happened today." Sword Venerable Flying Snow's thought was also the most urgent thought in everyone's mind. Very soon, The process and results of this battle were reported to the participating forces at the first possible moment, and all the major forces fell into shock and silence. At the northern part of the Qin dynasty's capital, Western Tomb City, the door to Prime Minister Wu Qingrou's study was currently closed. Wu Qingrou's confidants all knew that only when Wu Qingrou encountered a headache that he couldn't make a decision on would he close the door and stay in the study alone. This was extremely rare, and this time, the door was closed for an unprecedentedly long time. Chapter 488. The door to Wu Qingrou's study was closed. The master was alone in the study. Silently, a young man stood outside the study, waiting patiently. He knew that Wu Qingrou needed time to think. I thought it would be a draw. Who knew that Shu Mountain would suffer a crushing defeat? The young man knew why Wu Qingrou was deep in thought. It was because of the news he brought. In fact, the young man was shocked when he first received the news. It wasn't that he didn't think that Lin Feng could win, but he didn't expect the situation to be completely one-sided. After a long time, the door suddenly opened. Wu Qingrou's calm voice came from inside. Come in, Yuyan. The young man walked into the room and saw Wu Qingrou sitting behind the desk. His expression was as calm as water, and his eyes were like the deep sea. Eldest senior brother, the situation seems to be a bit unexpected. The young man, Huang Yuyan, deliberated over his words and said slowly, although Xi and Longxing didn't show up in person, and the old monsters of Mount Shu didn't come out of seclusion, 4 of the 5 great sword masters were defeated. Even the 6 meridian immortal heaven sword formation was broken. If not for the master of the celestial gate showing mercy, they would all have died there. Even so, Sword Venerate Guan Chang's return to void Dharma body shattered, his cultivation regressed, and even the Shaoyang sword and Taiyin sword were taken. Huang Yuyan sighed softly. Although Shu Mountain lost more than 1 primordial spirit cultivator, including Sword Venerate Taiyin, in the war of vanquishing Buddhism, the Tempest Monastery was still destroyed. This time, they returned in a terrible defeat. Since the war between the 2 worlds 4,000 years ago, Shu Mountain has never suffered such a great loss. Wu Qingrou smiled. It was indeed unexpected. The change this time was beyond my expectations. He looked at the pond in the distance outside the window of the study. Watching the ripples on the water, he said leisurely, speaking of which, this master of the celestial sect of wonders always surprises people. It's hard to see through him. He tapped his fingers on the table and said calmly, stop all activities against Shu Mountain. Put all the previous arrangements into hibernation. Wu Qingrou looked at Huang Yuyan and said, especially the arrangements against the Zhou dynasty and Shu Mountain. Oh right, I remember that the operation against the 4th prince of the great Zhou dynasty, Liang Qian, seemed to be unusual. Half a year ago, the original plan was to kill the 4th prince of the great Zhou dynasty, Liang Qian, at the southern foot of Kunlun Mountain. However, eldest senior brother instructed us to postpone the plan, so we didn't carry it out. Huang Yuyan nodded. But the other party seems to have sensed some movements and realized something. Wu Qingrou smiled. Beyond Heaven Mountain's move might have been exposed. Looks like Liang Qian's subordinates have sharp eyes. Then let's just leave it hanging like this. It'll be more of a deterrent when it's about to be unleashed, and it can also serve as a cover for other arrangements. Huang Yuyan asked, does eldest senior brother mean to not lead the great Zhou dynasty into a conflict with the Shushan sword sect and let Xianmen Tianzong face the Shushan sword sect alone? Wu Qingrou let out a rare sigh and shook his head. My previous judgment was wrong. I thought that Xianmen Tianzong was under too much pressure, so I planned to suppress the Shushan sword sect first and force them to settle down for a while without affecting the overall situation. But now, it seems that if we follow the original plan, Xianmen Tianzong, the Qin dynasty, and the Zhou dynasty will join forces to attack Shu, the Shushan sword sect will be under too much pressure. Wu Qingrou tapped his fingers on the table and suddenly smiled. Interesting. This is the second time I've changed my original plan because of Xianmen Tianzong. It's stupid to change my mind all the time, but I have no choice but to do it now. The master of the Taoist sect is indeed not simple. He stood up and walked out of the study. Yu Yan, go and make the arrangements. I still have to meet the Qin Emperor. Huang Yuyan nodded and sighed. I thought that after the fall of the Tempest Temple, the reincarnation sect would be the most likely to fill the vacancy of the three holy lands. But based on the current situation, it seems that Xianmen Tianzong, which has been established for less than a year, is more powerful. Wu Qingru smiled faintly. Maybe it is, but we don't know for sure. But in the history of the Tianyuan world, there have been many amazing figures who eventually withered and disappeared. Is Xianmen Tianzong an eternal star or an instant meteor? It's still too early to make a conclusion. He put his hands behind his back and walked out of the study. Facing the faint light of dawn, he squinted and smiled. Xu Shan has a good opponent now. The battle where Lin Feng broke the 6 meridians heavenly immortal sword formation of Xu Shan shocked the world. If people had only seen Lin Feng as a rising star before, then this battle had completely established his position as a giant in the divine land. After countless powers recovered from their shock, they all began to analyze the process of this battle and at the same time analyze the effects of this battle. The battle between the Xushan sword sect and Xianmen Tianzong has already reached the point where one side must die. Within the imperial city of the great Zhou dynasty, within the imperial palace, Emperor of Zhou sat cross-legged on the dragon throne. Slowly, he said, not to mention the fact that the reputation of the Xushan sword sect has been heavily damaged after this battle, just the fact that Lin Feng took away the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords is enough for Xushan to not let the matter rest. Within the imperial palace, the Marquis of Xuanji Zhu Hongwu replied silently, Your Majesty is wise, the people of Xushan are used to being arrogant. Blindly attacking Exa and Longsheng and the few great elders while they were in closed-door training, this defeat is not undeserved. In front of Zhu Hongwu stood a green-clothed girl, it was precisely Yan Mingyue. She sighed lightly, it's a pity that Exa and Longsheng's illustrious name was destroyed in a single day, having his divine ability and Dharma body destroyed by the master of Xian Gate. He won't be able to take revenge in a short period of time and redeem his face. For this kind of matter, if he can't get back at them on the spot, as time drags on, even if Exa and Longsheng wins the battle against Lin Feng in the future, he will still lose a lot of face. Liang Pan looked towards Zhu Hongwu, smiling slightly. However, the strength of this master of Xian Gate is truly beyond imagination. It seems like he won't be obediently killed by just 3 to 5 primordial spirit realm cultivators surrounding him. Unless these 3 to 5 primordial spirit realm cultivators are all strong practitioners like Exa and Longsheng. This was his idea of teasing Zhu Hongwu in the past. In the entire Great Zhou dynasty, perhaps only Liang Pan could tease his trusted official like this. Zhu Hongwu's expression did not change, Your Majesty is right, but even someone as strong as Yudu of the Tianhai Yudu ended up dying in the past. No matter who it is, if they stand in the way of the general trend, they will definitely end up with their bodies crushed. The master of Xian Gate, Lin Feng, should first prove that he can defeat Exa and Longsheng. Even though the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation of Xushan is strong, it is not invincible. Furthermore, the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation in this battle is not his peak condition. Liang Pan and Yan Mingyue both smiled slightly. What Zhu Hongwu said just now was not wrong. The 6 meridians heavenly sword formation of Xushan sword sect, in theory, was naturally the formation set up by 6 great sword cultivators of the 3rd tier of the primordial spirit realm. Its power was the greatest. That was also the most glorious moment in the history of Xushan sword sect. 6 strong practitioners of the primordial spirit realm had set up the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation and rampaged through the great heaven primordial world. Gods and Buddhas had to flee, establishing the position of Xushan sword sect as one of the 3 holy lands of the divine land. But as the world changed, some of the 6 great practitioners of the primordial spirit realm died, and some went missing. For tens of thousands of years after that, Shushan never had 6 great sword cultivators of the primordial spirit realm at the same time. The strongest 6 meridians heavenly sword formation thus became a lost song. After that, generally speaking, it was more common for 6 mighty practitioners of the second tier of the primordial spirit realm to set up a sword formation. This meant that the 6 great sword masters of Shushan's 6 meridian sword formation would set up the formation. At the same time, they would be paired with the Shaoyang sword, Taiyin sword, and other 6 meridians immortal swords. When 6 people and 6 swords worked together, they would obtain an extremely powerful killing power. They were invincible against those below the 3rd tier of the primordial spirit realm, and could even kill experts of the primordial spirit realm. They could even put up a fight against elite 3rd tier primordial spirit realm bulls like Yan Nanlai and Xian Longsheng. They were truly ferocious beyond compare. But in this battle with Lin Feng, the Taiyin Sword Lord had already fallen, the Shaoyang Sword Lord had remained in Shushan, and the Shaoshang Sword Lord and the other 3 did not bring the Shaoshang, Shaozi, Guanchong, and Li Xiong swords. The power of the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation had been greatly reduced. It was only after Xian Longsheng's immortal heaven sword Lord Dharma body had arrived that it showed some of its power. And now, even if Shushan made a comeback, Sword Venerable Moonshine had advanced to the 2nd tier of the primordial spirit realm, and Sword Venerable Guanchong had ascended to the primordial spirit realm, the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation would still be incomplete. This was because the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords had already fallen into Lin Feng's hands. Shushan's recklessness this time had caused them to lose far more than what they seemed on the surface. Silently, Zhu Hongwu said, "But this way, the great Qin dynasty might change course." Emperor Liang Pan of Zhou smiled. "That is to be expected. But there are some things that the great Qin dynasty is already like an arrow knocked on a bow. It has to be fired." He turned to Yan Mingyue. "Fairy Yan, there are some things that I will leave to you." Yan Mingyue lightly tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled. "It is already a matter of course. But seeing the outcome of this battle, Mingyue feels a little regretful." Liang Pan laughed heartily. "Fairy Yan must be joking. The ones who should be regretting are the others. Just as we have said, there are many things that are like an arrow knocked on a bow. It has to be fired. There is no room for regret." The others were constantly planning and plotting. Even though he did not know what they were thinking, Lin Feng knew in his heart that after this battle, his position in the human cultivation world of the divine continent would be completely different. He did not even need to check his reputation in the system. Just by looking at Old Sword Immortal, Sword Venerable Flying Snow, and the others, he could see the obvious change in their attitudes. It was not that they had changed from arrogance to deference, nor were they friendly. On the contrary, the attitude of Old Sword Immortal and the others towards Lin Feng was clearly more reserved and courteous than before. It was not that they were estranged, but that they respected an expert. This was the same attitude they had towards Taishu Temple Master Yan Nanlai, Shushan Sect Master Xian Longsheng, Emperor Qin Shiyu, Emperor Zhou Liangpan, and other major figures. Lin Feng's expression did not change at all. He was still chatting happily with the others. But at this moment, he had naturally become the center of attention. The major factions all expressed their goodwill towards Lin Feng. Old Sword Immortal of the Heavenly Sword Sect even extended an invitation to Lin Feng, hoping that Lin Feng would come to Tongtian Mountain as a guest. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.